Everyone. It is 6:30, and I'll call our work session to order. Our work sessions are very informal, and we have 4 items on the table. So we'll begin with the Performing Arts Center Angel Fund Series update. Mr. Brian Luther.
Thank you, Your Honor. First, I want to thank everyone for having me here tonight. I wanted to make a quick presentation on just an update of where the Angel Fund series is overall. We just finished our first season of the Angel Fund, and I also wanted to announce the shows that are coming up in this future Angel Fund series. Overall, as I'm sure everyone's aware, the Angel Fund was set up as an account that we are able to use so we can self-promote events at the Burnsville Performing Arts Center. And we just completed our first season, the 2011-2012 season, with a tremendous amount of success. We had 5 shows. We sold just under 3,200 tickets, which resulted in $82,162 worth of ticket sales. Now, these sales would not have been made possible without the establishment of this fund. So it's good to point out that these are new revenues from previous years of operation. Also, the good news to mention, too, is that the proceeds of these shows actually contributed back to the Angel Fund over $7,500. So we're very pleased that we're able to contribute back to the fund to continue the growth so that we can continue to program successful programming. As I mentioned before, the programs that we had would not have been made possible without the Angel Fund. And 2 of the shows, actually, I'd just like to point out real quick, just that helped us in the month of March of 2012 were Kevin Spencer's Theater of Illusion and Celtic Crossroads. Both of those shows were done on Thursday nights, where we had busy weekends, so we couldn't put them on a Friday and Saturday, which is our first choice, but we're able to program on a Thursday. Had over 700 people at each show, so we're able to really make good use out of what would typically be a dark night for us to be able to get more programming in, and the month of March was just fantastic for us as it was. So very pleased to obviously have those opportunities. So. Going into this year, we just announced the 2012-2013 season. It consists of five shows, and there are some multiple performances, but I'll walk you through real fast. We have 5 by Designs Club Swing on October 21st. We have on November 3rd and 4th the return of Away in the Basement, a church basement ladies' Christmas, which is looking to become a good annual event for us. Very popular.
Very good.
And we're gonna do 2 performances this year. We're gonna do a Saturday night performance and then a Sunday matinee, which is up from last year. So sales were very strong for us last year, so we wanted to make sure to maximize that opportunity. And also with Troop America, we're doing on November 17th Miracle on 34th Street. And we'll have 2 performances, a matinee and an evening on a Saturday show. And those are in partnership with Troop America. It's a relationship that we've had long-term with them, and it's been paying off very well. So very pleased with that. So that'll be the first half of the season. And then the second half is the Midlife Vices on March 7th, which is a female group called the Four Bitchin' Babes. And they sing everything about martinis to menopause, and it's a great night out. Definitely be a good ladies' night out, and even fun for a few of the husbands that have to go along as well too. But they've been touring around the country for years, and it's a terrific show. So we're hoping to build a good patron base with that show as well. And then we round out the season on March 8th with Street Beat, which is an urban percussive dance event that's going to be high energy. We're really looking forward to this one. I think it's going to be a great addition. So we're looking at a good diverse season this year. There are other opportunities that I'm working on as well too, with some other shows. Hopefully we'll be able to announce a couple additions down the road as well too. So I just wanted to give a quick overview on our Angel Fund series. So very pleased. Now, one thing to mention too, just would not be a complete presentation without just kind of mentioning the promotion that we are running right
You
now.
have to ask for the sale.
Yes, here's the sale. If you purchase at least 3 shows right now, you save $5 a ticket. So we are selling them on a season basis right now, but that's just 3 shows. You don't have to buy all the performances or buy for all the shows. So those are on sale right now, and that is a savings of over $50 if you purchase for the whole season. So we just wanted to make a note of that, and that they are on sale right now at our box office. And we'd recommend everyone get out and buy their tickets, and pick out your seats, and we look forward to a great Angel Fund year. So while I'm here, I would like to also just point out a couple quick shows that are coming up. Just a couple of fast ones here. A Chorus Line, which is the Chameleon Theater Circle. It's their last performance of the season. We are basically going through this weekend. Tickets are going very fast, so I'd recommend picking those up very quickly. If you have any interest in going, it's a terrific show. It's been getting rave reviews. I would recommend it to everyone, but I would recommend getting the tickets quick because they are selling very well. So we're very pleased that they're ending their season with such a successful run as well. We have Favorite Nation on July 27th, which is a Christian arts ministry show. And the play is The Thing Productions, which is a youth theater production of Wizard of Oz on August 10th, and that's August 10th through the 12th. And then on August 25th, the Dream Tour with Brian Culbertson and David Sanborn. So those are some of the highlights going into this summer, and there will be a couple other announcements coming up here very soon, but very pleased right now with the programming, obviously coming off this last fiscal year, and the announcement of the new Angel Fund series. So just wanted to bring everybody up to speed on that and actually open it up for any questions, whether it's
Thank-
programming related or even just operations based too.
Councilmember Keeley.
Thank you. Well, it's great news. When we set off to set up that Angel Fund, there's risk involved, obviously, and delighted to hear some positive income for the fund as a result of that first series. The next series, covering the next several months into early spring of next year, look great. And so excited. You presented some pretty good numbers that reflected the Angel Fund itself and then the ticket sales. I'm curious, since these shows would not have existed but for the Angel Fund, what was the net income result of those shows? And in other words, what impact to the bottom line did those shows have in a positive manner for the center?
Well, as I mentioned, they did generate just over $82,000 worth of ticket sales. And if you take expenses out of that, I don't have that specific number as we sit today, but obviously it's all new revenues. So
Right.
we're able to, once we contribute back to the Angel Fund, that's after paying our building expenses, our
Right.
rent, and all of our income. So, it's a good portion. I mean, I would say probably.
You can estimate, I mean.
Yeah,
I
probably
wouldn't-
half of it. I mean, maybe half to
Right.
two-thirds is
So-
new revenue stream that.
Excellent.
Yeah.
A nice big boost.
So it definitely is. And it's really, when you look at the risk and reward, we want to make sure we're picking shows that we know have a good opportunity to sell tickets that fit the audience, that fit this community. And so
Sure.
that's really the look at it. And obviously to grow the fund as well.
Sure.
So,
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions for Brian? Brian, thank you very much and great job.
You're welcome.
I really enjoyed it. I was at Copa this Sunday, and that was really a wonderful performance to hear the music from the Copacabana, and the singers were fabulous also. And to have big band.
Yes.
Was wonderful, so that was
Thank you.
great.
Thank you for coming out.
Yeah,
All right. Thanks, everyone.
yeah.
Thank you.
The next item on our agenda is the billboard LED signs, and Jenny, you're going to start us out. Correct. And then I know that we have Matthew Wieland from Clear Channel here to also speak, so.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the council. If I could ask the gentleman from Clear Channel to have a seat at the table as we walk through this. I provided a lot of information in your background on the history of billboards in Burnsville. As you know, we have a long history with that. They currently are permitted in our I-1 and I-2 zoning districts, adjacent to arterial and interstate freeways. Of course, that's where you see most of them. They're also permitted as a principal use, the idea being when the site is developed or a building goes on it, the billboard goes away. And in B3, they can remain with certain conditions as outlined in the ordinance. Changeable copies for billboards are up to eight times per day, which is different from our changeable copy for reader boards. And then the adding of dynamic displays to existing billboards constitutes a expansion of that nonconformity, so that is also not allowed under the current ordinance. I need a drink of water. Okay, so historically, over probably the last 20 or 30 years, there have been several changes to our billboard ordinances. I tried to summarize them in the background for you. And the intent of our ordinance, as many other city ordinances as well, is to eliminate them over time. There's generally, from a zoning perspective, something that is not desired in the community. Via our PUDs and conditional use permits, conditions have been put in place that call for the removal of billboards on several properties. And you have a memo in your background from Joel that deals with amortization, that it's no longer legal, and our ordinances, of course, have been updated to reflect that as well. In your background, I provided a map of where they are, and historically, back in 1988, we had 23 billboards. 1997, we're down to 12 of them. 11 of the 12 are non-conforming, and then in 2008, we're down to 9. So a slow decrease in the number of billboards. And you'll see most of them are along 35W in the River Valley, down off County Road 42, and then some on the peripheries off Highway 13. So some of the provisions that we have on the books right now are 1 and 2 up on Kramer's site. Those billboards are slated to be considered for removal when that site develops with the development of the MRQ. That was put in place back in 1997. Then on the east side of 35, we settled out of court back in 2003 to allow that billboard to stay for another 20 years, so till 2023. And then on the south side on Trunk Highway 13 and 121st Street, this one came up, there's an access drive to that billboard, and when an adjacent site develops where the billboard's in the way, that billboard has to go. And then there's 2 conditions regarding Jean Young, who had the Youngs owned the property where Burnsville Marketplace was, that those billboards go away when Miss Young passes away. That's her ongoing revenue source that she has in her retirement. So that leaves us with 3 non-conforming billboards that don't have a removal plan. I provided to you today a survey of other cities' zoning ordinance, and I won't walk through all of them, but I've provided a summary here in the PowerPoint. So most cities prohibit new billboards, and I'm sure Clear Channel can speak to these too as part of their experience, but in most cities, existing billboards are grandfathered in. Of course, they can keep them, and the adding of LED and dynamic display, similar to our ordinance, constitutes an increase in that nonconformity and is not allowed. Display times do vary. The majority are 15 to 20 minutes rotation. Some, although, are 8 times a day. Some are a minute. I think I found one that was 8 seconds. A few cities allow them in certain areas. That'd be like the city of Blaine and West St. Paul. And West St. Paul, just so you know, has a direct lease with the city. That's on city property, so there was a benefit to West St. Paul to put that up, similar to our cell tower land lease agreements that you may be familiar with. And then interestingly, Minnetonka, Eagan, and Maplewood offer incentives to convert existing billboards to the dynamic display. Such incentives include removing 2 billboards to have 1 LED billboard, for instance. Another incentive may provide for community signs or PSA notices as well. So our questions to you, after Clear Channel goes through their presentations, has to do with to what extent the council wants to modify the ordinance. I've given you some examples of what other cities do. We can allow new ones, we can deal with just the existing ones, or we can leave the ordinance the same. We don't have to change the ordinance, but we can do changes through PUDs dealing with the landowners directly. And if you want further study by the Planning Commission or other members of the public or other commissions, if you want that, we'd like to know that too.
Gentlemen, Craig.
Madam Mayor, Ms. Faulkner touched on it, but I wanted to say one other thing too, as it relates to some of the other ordinances. They're slightly contrary to what the city attorney and I have discussed. Is a past practice in Burnsville, and I think a desirable one, and that is the linkage of benefits to the city, cash benefits or in-kind benefits to the city influencing a zoning decision. And to state it a different way, whatever the council determines to do in the way of the billboards, permitting them more loosely, not permitting, whatever you do, I think that that's a zoning decision.
Yeah.
But to tie that to some material gain for the city, we think is a separation that needs to be made. That whatever, if there could be some financial gain to the city by permitting them on a piece of city property, totally appropriate. But the idea of a quid pro quo for a zoning decision and some cash coming to the city or other in-kind benefit, to us does not seem to be in keeping with the way we've handled zoning in the past. And I think Joel can expand more on this.
Yeah, Mary?
Well, I just want to clarify it because I think I know what you mean by that. When you say if it were on publicly owned property, it'd be appropriate. What you're saying is not necessarily that the billboard would be appropriate, but getting advertising or type like that, if it existed. You're just talking about the advertising.
Or linking zoning decisions to compensation.
Yeah, absolutely. I just want to separate that, because
Yeah.
the way you were
Councilor-
saying it.
yeah,
I want to
Councilor
make sure
Sherry-
that it's actually
Yes.
truly understood by the public.
For instance, if we had some city property, assume that council determines to say that billboards are an acceptable land use, and then we had some city property that could be leased to a company that would be in the billboard business, and then we negotiate a deal, totally appropriate.
To have city
Yeah, to have
messages
city
on it.
revenue tied to that.
Yeah.
Because then we would be treating ourselves as we would any other property owner. But I think that we're a bit on a slippery slope if we say that because someone has offered something of value to the city, that influences the council's decision on whether or not this is an appropriate zoning thing. That seems to be much different than the way the city has treated zoning
Yeah.
in the past.
Thank you for making that clarification. Mr. Wieland?
Thank you. Good evening, Madam Mayor, City Council. My name is Matthew Wyland. With me here tonight is also Tom McCarver. Thanks for the opportunity to speak to you guys tonight and talk to you about digital billboards. Tonight, I'm just going to briefly go over some things we've done in other communities around the metro area. I'm going to talk to you about public service announcements. I'm going to specifically talk to you about what we're proposing here in Burnsville. Highlight a few zoning changes if this were to move forward, things we'd have to look at in the future. And then we're certainly available for any questions. Clear Channel and other communities. We're currently in 11 different cities around the metro area. We've constructed 30 digital signs, which represents 44 digital faces. The closest signs that we've located to Burnsville is we have 2 digital billboards in Egan. There's one on Highway 77, and there's one on Highway 494, give you an opportunity to go look at how they operate close by to you. The current one that we're currently building right now is just north of you. On the other end of 35W up in Mounds View is one we're currently converting now. Here's some examples of signs we built in these communities. The new digital signs that we're putting in now, we're putting in monument-style signs. We're wrapping the columns in brick or stone facades. In this case, this is the city of Blaine. It's got a brick facade. It's got the city logo on it. This is one we just did in Mounds View. It's got a stone facade on it. And this is another one in the city of West St. Paul. That was a taller structure, and it's a monopole in the middle. But that just gives you an idea of the new structures that we're building now. These aren't the old structures that we used to build. Which leads me on to public service announcements. One of the things that we do offer all the communities that we have digital signs in is we offer up to 5 hours of public service announcements per face per month if the city so chooses to use those announcements. What that works out to be is 2,258 second public service messages. The way the boards work is there's 8 advertisers with 8-second messages, and you get put in with the regular advertisers. I'll show you some examples. Communities use these opportunity to advertise everything from their own community facilities, like community centers. They advertise their local festivals, and a lot of them now are actually using them for public education, which I'll show you some examples on that. In addition to the public service announcements, we do participate in Amber Alerts, if you're familiar with that program. We also partner with the FBI on their FBI Most Wanted list, or fugitives, fugitive want lists. And we also participate in regional emergencies. An example of this would be the unfortunate incident when the I-35 bridge collapsed. We work with local authorities and making that known ahead of time. Here's some examples of public service announcements that different cities do. The top ones are in Plain. They're advertising their pet walk. Their local law enforcement uses it for different things. This was a click it and ticket campaign they did. The next ones are things the city of Egan has done about the hydrants and just about the city. City of Minnetonka has really embraced it as a way for public education. They have one there on talking about buckthorn, water conservation. They've done a lot of them with water quality, that kind of thing. We started a new program with Minneapolis this year. Did not end up getting any snow, but they're actually going to use their digital billboards to help declare snow emergencies in the city. And the other one there is just severe awareness week for Blaine. So now on to what we're specifically talking about here in Burnsville. We certainly appreciate the time we've had to speak with you guys, have listened to your comments, have heard your concerns. And what we're proposing here tonight, we hope addresses your concerns and meets our need and seems like a good fit for everybody. What we're specifically proposing tonight is two things, and I'll run through them. First thing we're proposing is would like an opportunity to build a new digital billboard. And we're proposing to build new digital billboards through a cap and replace program. What that specifically means is you need to remove a billboard in order to build a new digital billboard. And what we'd specifically be talking about it at the beginning here is kind of more of a pilot program. Is focusing on that corridor where your billboards generally are, north of Highway 13 along the I-35 corridor, focused on commercial and industrial land there. What this means is that there's no net gain in billboards in your city, and instead, we're just concentrating them in more appropriate corridors. The next thing is we'd like to also propose an opportunity to convert existing billboards to digital faces. Non-conforming billboards, the ones that are here, have rights. They're probably going to be here a long time. Through the conversion, it's an opportunity to upgrade these structures to more of a monument-style structure, a nicer-looking structure. It's an opportunity for public service advertisement. It's an opportunity for more opportunities for local businesses to have an opportunity to advertise. And again, we're not adding new billboards. In addition to this, and I'll go over this in your zoning changes, you're still going to have digital spacing guidelines in place. So not every existing billboard you have is going to become a digital billboard. We're proposing here 1,200 feet in the same view shed. So there'd only be a couple in that corridor. But again, both of these proposals, we're not talking about adding new signs.
Mary?
Could you explain the term view shed?
View shed, it's just the same direction that you're driving the vehicle. So it's the signs that you can see as you're driving
Thank you.
the same direction.
Okay.
Other thing we'd looked at, just to take a look at things we could do here in the city of Burnsville.
Bill?
So the no net new billboard proposal, is that like have 9 now? How many do we have? Sorry.
Yeah.
So would you further explain the no net new billboard proposal as to how many we have now and how that would relate to what your proposal is?
Sure. You have 9 now. Under the, in order to build a new sign, we would take down one of our existing signs in another area, build a new sign in this corridor, so you'd still have 9, but we're not gaining signs.
And really, then the only difference would be, it might be while it'd be in a certain corridor area, it might be in a different location.
Correct. And we're saying you're going to concentrate them in that I-35 corridor north of 13.
Okay, go on.
This is just some examples of things we can do. We are able to get more creative with our signs. To create more of a monument-style sign, we can incorporate cities' logos and creativity as much as we can in the corridor to try to create an asset as you enter the community. Like I said, again, these aren't our old sign, these are new signs. There's a significant investment put in these signs, and we want them to look good. So we use high-quality design and high-quality materials on them. Next, I just want to highlight some zoning changes. If this does move forward, and this is something we're interested in doing, I just want to touch on things that we're going to be bringing back. I know there's a process to go through, and these things get hashed out later, but we just wanted to highlight some of the things that we'd be discussing later. Probably the first main thing is we would need 8-second dwell time on the billboards. That means that the message changes every 8 seconds. And that's consistent with what we've done in the other communities that we have these. It's the way the model works. So that'd be the first thing that we'd need to have considered. The other thing I mentioned earlier was we'd be proposing 2,500 foot spacing on the dynamic billboards, read from the same direction. Obviously, you'd have to develop cap and replace requirements as well as digital conversion requirements. The other thing that we'd want to bring up and talk about is modifying the principal use requirements, especially as you redevelop some of that vacant land in that corridor. And then finally, if the city so chooses, to have a public service announcement requirements. And then there's also brightness requirements. And some of these things you already touched in your ordinances, but those are additional things that we'd be bringing up again through the process.
Mary?
Question. On the 2,500-foot spacing requirement, if you're only going to cap and replace or convert existing ones, then where does the spacing even come up as an issue? Because you wouldn't even have new ones.
But through the conversion process, either conversion or new, there's still existing billboards in that corridor.
So they're closer than 2,500 feet.
Right, so, you could put that map back up, but the one here converted, there couldn't be any other ones for 2,500 feet. So it's because of the existing billboards, you still want to have them
Okay,
spaced
so
out.
what you're saying is some of the ones that are there would have to come down.
No, I'm saying they couldn't be converted to
What
digital.
Oh, I
you
see.
would
Could
not
be
want
converted.
in the
Got it,
view
got it.
shed is multiple messages changing at the
Gotcha.
same time.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Dan?
When you look at this 2,500 feet, you're talking about taking a billboard down somewhere in town and replacing it down in that corridor with a new board, which will keep you at 9. When we're at 2,500 feet, how close are you going to be to your competitor, and does that put them out of
Yeah.
the
This
business?
is a zoning issue. I have a lot of questions because how many?
Well, I want to get mine in
Yeah,
first, okay?
Yeah.
So that 2,500 feet, does that eliminate your competitor from being able to do the same thing you're doing?
Depends on which signs we're looking to convert, but yeah, if we convert a sign here, that spacing is gonna space out existing signs, yes.
And how many signs do you have down in that corridor right now?
We have 2 in that quarter,
And how many do your competitors have down there?
2.
2.
2? And you're all within 2,500 feet of each other right
No.
now, or close to? No?
One we have right by 13, that would be ours. And there are 3 concentrated between Kramer and the public storage
Okay.
facility.
So how would that look if a 2,500-foot billboard were to go up and you put it at the end down by Kramer's? How would that look coming back with the CPS, I think it is?
Yep.
How would that look for them? How close are they to those signs where?
CBS
Are
is
they
right
knocked out-
across the road on
Are they knocked out of
one.
the game, or are they still going to be able to?
Here's how I've answered that in the past, because I've changed or been part of about 20 ordinance changes in the metro now, and this is the same issue we've had all along. We recognize the same rights they have as we do. If they come in and get a permit before we do, that's the way it goes. What specifically I don't want to do is to have 2 signs in the same view shed. I wouldn't do it. I wouldn't propose it. If they had one right now, I would not come in with a proposal to say we should put one right next to it. I've seen that in other communities. Phoenix, for example, has that setup where literally there are 3 companies that have them in the same 1,000-feet view shed. It does not work. I mean, I don't, from a visual standpoint, I don't see value in that from a planning perspective and so on. So
Just a quick follow-up. So under your proposal here, your competitor could conceivably come in and do the same thing and take down one of those billboards within 2,500 feet of you and move back if they can negotiate with a
absolutely,
property owner.
this is fair game for everyone that has
All right.
skin in the game.
Thank you.
Bill?
Just out of personal curiosity, I see that in Minnetonka, when you made the deal, it was 2 down for every one you got. How many does Minnetonka have?
Minnetonka had of course, every city's different, but they had a number of structures on Highway 7. The structures that we converted were 494 and 394. Essentially, the decision came up, Highway 7 was kind of cutting through there were some residential, some wetlands and so on, and those signs had been there literally for 50-plus years. The signs on 394 and 494 were much newer and considered kind of on the boundaries of Minnetonka, so they didn't see them as an impact. So the settlement on that was to take those out of there and convert those. That's how the ratio came up. It wasn't per se based on a ratio saying, well, it's just 2 to 1. It was more about a plan that said, these aren't appropriate for this area anymore, but they are appropriate over here. So that was kind of the swap or the trade that was made. In Burnsville, there just aren't that many signs to be traded.
So how many were in Minnetonka at the time you made the deal?
I think, I'm sorry, I don't
Best guess,
recall, but I
best
think
guess.
it's 15. I think there were 15 poster faces, and we converted 5 bulletin faces.
On the Kramer property, one is CBS and one is yours.
Correct.
They're very close together.
Yes,
They're
ma'am.
not 2,500 feet apart.
That is correct.
I don't know how, we don't, this is a zoning issue, and so I'm going to address it from a zoning perspective. But you're proposing something that's going to impact one of our property owners. With the 2,500 spacing.
Where they wouldn't be able to go to LED because they would have to stay poster face because it's too close to an
Yeah,
existing LED.
but I mean, those are some of the, but the issue for me, I'm going to, instead of looking at what you're proposing, I'm going to address it from a zoning perspective on what's good for the city of Burnsville. Yeah, Mary?
I have another concern, and that is, if you would make this investment with the existing, with the technology that you're proposing and doing the conversions in particular, would you expect then to abide by our policy where when and if that land is developed, that those signs would then be retired, would come down forever?
I think, to speak to that, I would say a couple of things. Obviously, we've got leases, well, we have an easement on the one that is close to 13, but we have leases with our other property owners. So to the extent that we've got permits and for instance, on Kramer has a separate PUD, within that lease, we discuss that PUD. So there is a mechanism within that piece.
But the short answer is you'd expect to keep the signs there.
The short answer is I'd have to abide by the rules that are in
The
place at the
PUD.
time.
Okay, all right.
Okay. Did you want to proceed with your performance?
Certainly. Almost done. I was at conclusion. Just in conclusion, we're obviously interested in expanding our network in your community. We think we offer a good partnership. We think through the digital conversion, it's an opportunity to upgrade structures, offer the city opportunities for public service announcements. Again, we're not talking about any net gain of billboards in town. We're trying to upgrade what's there. If this is something that's of interest to the city, it is something we're looking to get done this year. We have a plan in place that we could get it done this year. So we're here looking for direction. Thank you for your guys' time up to this point. Thank you for your time talk tonight. With that, we're interested in the discussion, and we're interested in what the next steps could be, and we're available to answer any questions.
Thank you. Yes,
Mayor, I'm sorry, I would like to.
would you like to come to, so that those who are, yeah. I know that there are some of our residents that I've heard from are here to speak, and others are not here who wanted to be here. Please give us your name and address for the record.
My name is Judith Moore, and I live at 13209 Highview. And I have a conflict tonight, and so I have to leave right now. I would love to stay to hear more of tonight's work session. But I have one real concern, and that is from a safety standpoint. I find these constantly changing LED signs, especially on an 8-second cycle here, very distracting. And 35W is already bumper to bumper and very heavily traveled at certain times of the day. And I just have a real issue with this kind of a distraction being put there. So that's all I have to say, and I wish I could stay longer.
Okay,
Thank
thank
you.
you. Thank you. Okay. Members of the council, tonight, this is a zoning issue that's before us. What are your thoughts? Dan?
Well, I know that we've had this type of discussion before where our citizens have come in and expressed concerns over the changeable signs. And I believe we've gone through a few iterations of debate and discussion on any evidence out there that has shown that they are in fact the cause of additional traffic incidences, and there's yet to no evidence whatsoever. It's just a fear that we all have. I mean, everybody feels the same way, and until you look at the actual evidence and find that there isn't any data to support, it's an eye distraction, but it's a split second. And then one just has to drive through Las Vegas on Las Vegas Boulevard, and you'll find that the 8-second display on a billboard every 2,500 feet in the Twin Cities is nothing at all compared to the eye distractions of all of the lights blinking and flashing in life size in Las Vegas and in other areas of the country. So I'm sensitive to that. I've heard that from a few people, but I think we've already had that debate and discussion that there isn't any data to support that claim. That's just a fear that we have. It's a natural fear, but it isn't a real fear that translates into any kind of accident rate. I agree with you, Madam Mayor. This is, we're not making decision to just affect Clear Channel. It's going to affect anybody that wants to come to the table to do something like this. I think I was curious if Clear Channel has worked with KMM, because since they have two billboards, this is a free market. It's the first one to the table gets the fruit, and the leftovers go to those that come late. If the other owner of the billboard has not presented or come to the table or doesn't, it really wouldn't be up to us as a city. We would lay the groundwork through a zoning ordinance, and the market decides who gets to put an LED billboard there first, if whoever's first to market. We don't need to meddle in free market issues. We only need to stay in the zoning issues and decide whether we want to make this zoning change or not. I'm sensitive to the comments that Madam Mayor, you've made, and a few others, and we've heard through email about the sight line to the river valley. I actually, until I saw this map or drove it, did not remember that there were 4 billboards existing on I-35. And one would think that there are no billboards on I-35 when you hear comments that, citizens are objecting to these billboards because they don't want to distract or ruin the visual, the sight lines or the vision of the river valley. It already has 4 billboards in it. Honestly, I thought there was 2, one on either side of the highway. So we have 4 there now. The Clear Channel folks are talking about relocation, staying at Net 9, possibly putting another one in that corridor. That may be a difficult decision for us to make because of the existing concern. But since there's 4 there now, we don't have a clear shot of the river valley undisturbed, because we also have I-35 interstate highway, which cuts right through the middle of that river valley, which is a far bigger distraction to nature and the serene river valley than these billboards could ever be. So we live in a world of interstate highways that cut over rivers and cut through our beautiful scenery like that. So that isn't going to change anything. Whether we have 4 billboards or 5 billboards or 2 billboards, it still is what it is. And so it's nothing we can do about it. So I'm still in favor of looking at this zoning decision. I believe that I personally would rather see, if we're going to have 9 billboards in the city, I'd rather see some of them be LED. I'd like to be a part of something that can provide amber alerts for the city. I would like to be a part of something that can provide PSA announcements about the city and benefits and events going on in the city, because we don't have that now. We have 9 billboards and we don't have any of that. So why wouldn't we change the zoning to update it to allow some of them to be LED and allow some of that benefit for the citizens in the city? Since we're not talking about adding any billboards, we're talking about keeping the same number that we had. And I think that was another fear that a lot of people had. It's like, oh my God, you're going to put billboards all over the place. That's not what we're talking about here. So.
Okay. I'm going to go to Dan and then come to you, Mary and Bill, so we hear from everybody. Is that okay?
Sure. I just have a question for Clear Channel. Have you picked out a billboard you would take down?
There's a site on County
How
Road.
many do you own, first of all, in the city?
I'm sorry?
How many do you own in the city?
4.
You
And
own
we-
4 in the city.
Correct. So we own 2 on 35, 1 on 13, and 1 on County Road 11. So the one on County Road 11 probably would be the one that we would take down. I mean, that would be if we were allowed through this to convert, or take it, build a new sign in that area, that would be the most likely candidate.
Would you consider taking one down on 35 to replace with an LED?
No.
Okay, I'm ready. From what I understand, because these are non-conforming, there are certain statutes in place now, these billboards could stay from now to the end of time unless we want to fork over some money to buy them out of it, correct?
With the caveat being that the principal use provision, as well as some of the other conditions that Ms. Faulkner outlined, probably indicates that you will lose several if you stay the course.
Okay.
Yeah, because of the principal use provision as well as the life estate provision.
But the non-conforming, they can stay there pretty much.
The other ones, yes, correct.
Okay, that's what we're, I think that's really what we're talking about, the non-conforming billboards right now. You know, and when I look at that and realize that those billboards are there to stay, I think this change could actually upgrade at least the existing boards and give us a nicer looking product than what we see on the river right now. What Dan had to say, I had written this down, was also that, you know, with the PSA, Amber Alerts, and some of the other things that they're talking about, as well as this offering kind of almost a monument sign time to the city, that's a bonus. That's not the reason we want to change the zoning. That's just a bonus that we're going to receive should we do this. You know, as far as, you mentioned, Madam Mayor, about how this affects the landowner, and I would think that it really shouldn't affect with their competitor on the land unless that competitor decides to pull their billboard down, and I can't imagine anyone, if they didn't have to take a billboard down, taking one down. So I would assume that's probably going to stay with it. So I would support us going forward and looking at ways to do this. I do like the fact that you can do the Amber Alerts, and I do like the PSAs, which helps our festivals and our Performing Arts Center and the sports in town, and even calling out for commissioners to apply for our commission jobs, and, you know, get one more way to get the message out. And right now in the 21st century, that's what's happening. It's instant messaging. It's happening all over the place, and I think this gives us an opportunity in Burnsville to have that.
Mary?
Gentlemen, I will disagree with you in these ways. First of all, regarding the Amber Alerts, we already have the overhead boards on our interstates that MnDOT puts the Amber Alerts up there. So I think that isn't an argument that I think is you know, convincing to me anyway to change my mind. City announcements, I have to agree with our city manager. I'm very, very uncomfortable about allowing doing that on that is not city-owned property. I feel that in my sense is that it's consideration. It's giving something to get something. That is troubling to me from an ethical point of view. The other thing is, I have to say I'm relieved to hear that they're not proposing any more billboards. That's good news to me. But I also disagree on the 8 seconds, and one reason I disagree about that, Dan, is that I think as our population ages, and I'm a little ahead of you there, quite a bit ahead of you, actually, distractions are an increasing problem with the older driver. And I just spent a weekend in Chicago, and in the city. I was right in the city, and I'll tell you what, those digital boards are unbelievably distracting. And they're all over on 290. I was on 290. I was on the Kennedy, and I was on the, I still want to call it Congress, the Eisenhower. So, and I was also on I-88. So I was on a lot of roads, and you know, my passenger was probably freaked because I kept looking at the billboards. But they're really a distraction. They're visually distracting. And I think as our population ages, and I'm not just talking about Burnsville, I'm talking about everybody who drives an RV on 35W, going up to the woods for the winter or the summer and coming back to Florida in the winter. You know what? They're not kids. I think the view of the river valley is an asset, and I really want to ask that question of all of you. Do you think the view of the river valley is an asset to this community? We have billboards there now. But the reason these gentlemen are proposing this product is what they're proposing is far more visible and attractive in terms of marketing than a static poster board. So I do think that what I believe is an asset, and I would love to hear your opinion about whether or not this is an asset, this valley, I think that's going to be affected. Does this asset have a value to our community? I believe it has. I think that we have a lot of things that we're struggling with us in this community, and I think that we've got something that was just given to us on a platter, and that is a view of this wonderful valley. I do not want to see that this has any more clutter in it than it already has. Finally, I would ask the question that I've asked before when we've considered other policy changes. And that is, when the policy was set in place, and it was, as Ms. Faulkner pointed out, it was done over a number of years and lots of tweaking, probably the last time around was 20 years ago, that was put in place based on certain assumptions and certain fundamentals. Here we are in 2012, and I would like to know what fundamentals have changed that should make us want to change our policy or our ordinance. If you can tell me certain fundamentals have changed, and I don't mean just technology, because we can make them bigger and brighter and we can put them on posts, that's not a fundamental to me. I'm thinking of fundamental needs or desires of this community. What has changed since our ordinance was put in? Maybe the best way to look at that is to have a committee, as Ms. Faulkner suggested, that in her background, I think, or a group existing or appointed, really study this in depth. The last question is, what are the benefits to Burnsville? Not to advertisers, but what are the benefits to Burnsville? And with that, I think you know how I feel.
Okay. Bill?
Well, the first thing I'd like to note is that Blaine has had as I read Ms. Faulkner's detail as to the various ordinances that Blaine has had their dynamic display ordinance for 2 years, and I assume their signs have been up for at least, how long? 2 years?
Yeah.
And I note that they have an 8-second duration, and I also note that these signs are along 35 and US Highway 10, is that correct?
Correct.
And that there are other, I see that Egan has a longer duration for their sign on 77.
Actually, those are 8 seconds.
Oh, they are as well, okay.
Yep. There's only one city that we operate in that has longer. St. Paul has a 12-second.
So I've driven and seen the sign on Cedar many times. I've not had the benefit of driving up through Blaine, but it has not distracted me. I've not, as a lawyer that pays attention to accidents and events, I've not come across any adverse information as to that being some sort of higher risk event, and that there are I see St. Louis Park, there's various other cities as well that seem to have tied that 8-second duration. And I also note that Egan, in their own review of this, they have a digital sign right on their river quadrant coming over Cedar, and, that is something that they have allowed for various reasons. I am always respectful of the past, but not to go into detail on some argument, but sometimes, things evolve and change. I thought Dan Keeley's assessment and analysis was well stated, And I view it as a zoning issue, and I think we should move forward, and I think that the no net gain proposal is reasonable, and I would vote that the city go forward to look at some way.
Did you want to go, or did you want me to go? Because I'm
go on out.
ready.
Madam
Or
Mayor.
did you?
Madam
I'm
Mayor.
trying.
Go around again?
Madam Mayor, we have somebody
Oh,
from the
okay.
audience
Oh.
who'd like to speak.
Yeah.
My name is Mary Lou Foster. I've lived in Burnsville for
Oh.
40 years.
Can you want to?
I don't really want to, no. I think you can hear me.
Oh, because we have
Then
people
people can hear
watching
you.
from, and they would like to hear you.
Oh. My
Yeah.
name is Mary Lou Foster. I've lived in Burnsville for 40 years, and I have traveled both sides. I'm on the east side in North River Hills. When I heard Mary Sherry say, what benefit is this to our city? I've had people from out of town who have moved here, friends who have come here, and they always commented that they didn't like to come in on 35. It is not an attractive entry to the city in the past. And it's getting better, but I think it can be even better. And I don't see where billboards, what benefit is that to Burnsville? I don't see. I don't see where the addition would be. I can see getting rid of more and more and more as that's possible. But I don't see these digital billboards as adding any value to the citizens of our city. I don't think it adds visually. I don't think it does anything for our real estate coming into town. It's kind of a first impression. And you come in from Burnsville, from the north, from both sides, over the river. And I guess that's my comment. And I don't see why we'd expand and make something bigger that already is not attractive. I don't understand it, or why we'd have more, or why we'd have 4 in a row, or because Las Vegas has a whole row of them, I don't think that's appealing. We're not Las Vegas, and I don't think we want to be. I think we have to look at what our vision is. Yes, I know that we're in the 21st century, but we have tweets, and we have media coming at us from all directions at all time, and we have over our highways now signs and alerts. So I don't see why we have to add to that. Thank you for your time.
Well, thank you for sharing your thoughts. Okay. Did you want, or shall I? Yeah.
We'll go back around round 2 after we get done.
Okay, thank you. Council, as this item came before us, I thought about what is it that we want Burnsville to look like long-term. And so Craig and I had meetings in Minnetonka, so we took 2 different routes. And I told him that what I wanted to do was to see how many billboards were in other cities. And I wanted to understand what was going on from a visual standpoint. And as we crossed the river, between the river and the intersection of 35W and 494, there was only 1 billboard. And then there were billboards around the intersection. We went up to 62 and then went to get back onto 494. There was not 1 billboard. And then when I saw Ms. Faulkner's research, Edina doesn't allow it. And then when we came back from Minnetonka, from the city hall, all the way back this way. There were no billboards from where we entered the freeway in Minnetonka and all through Eden Prairie. And so I see that, and I talked to the mayor of Eden Prairie at the meeting, and she said that they prohibit those. And also Eden Prairie, and I see all of that. So from my perspective, it's looking at the zoning. That's one part. The other part is, what do we want Burnsville to look like long-term? And this is a product. Yes, it's a product with LED and with changing signs from 8-second to 12. And these are all part of a zoning issue. My question to all of us is that what is it that we want for Burnsville? When we drive and we have visitors coming in, what do we want? So I understand that what is being proposed is not to change our zoning and what we have, but to just have an improvement of the product. So there is something that's on the research that was done, and that was in Minnetonka, where if you're going to put up these LED boards, then I think that, how many do you have? 4?
Yeah.
If you want to do that, you take down 2. If you, please, I'm just trying to look at reducing the signs. If you want to put up these LED boards, I'm just trying to find a way, because what I want and what Mary Sherry and I are looking at, it's the long-term view of the city and its attractiveness long-term. So,
And we can certainly respect that. I've worked with many cities of varying degrees. When Blaine changed their ordinance, we worked with them for years to talk about different sign opportunities. And when this came along, they actually had an amortization ordinance on the books till 2 years ago. It was illegal, but they kept it around until the thing changed. So it gives you a mindset where these have moved into the 21st century, if you'd like to call it that. To go to your piece on taking down and converting and so on, the opportunity that we have on 11 is bank-owned property. No person owns it today. The other opportunities, there are active business partners that are there, and the one opportunity that we would add potentially would also be a business interest. And so one of the things that you may want to consider is you're talking about a corridor that already is a highly traveled, highly commercial corridor. I'm not sure, from my perspective, what gain there would be if you're talking about picking winners and losers in that category. I don't know how that works. We've tried to do the research, and I certainly understand, to be clear, we have done Minneapolis, for instance, is another community. We've done cap and replace in. Minneapolis had, in the early 90s, 500 signs. So we took down over 200 during that last 20-year period. Totally different ballgame when you're talking about what their city was looking like and what they had to deal with. We have signs. I think the earliest permit I've got on record is 1918. So we've got things that have grown up around these that have changed the parameters of what we're dealing with. So it makes sense. Trade out one that doesn't work anymore for both the city and us and put it into an area that works. We just don't have that opportunity here. We've got one sign that I'm looking at that says, potentially this is one that would work. That would be my view.
that would work in what way?
Where would that sign be?
County 11, I'm sorry.
Or where you would take it down?
County
That will
11,
take that down.
yes, ma'am.
And is that County 11 and 13, or County Road 11 and 35E? Is it, which,
County
is
11.
it number
The one
6 or number 9?
11 and, it's 13 and 11.
Okay, yeah.
It's 35E.
35E.
Oh, it is
now then.
35E.
Yeah.
isn't it?
35E.
It's number 9 on our map.
Yeah.
6 is up by 13.
Okay.
So, is that one oriented, I drive that all the time, and I don't remember seeing
number
it. Is it
9.
on County Road 11 or is it on 35E? I mean, is it-
It's on 11.
It's on
so it's
11.
Yeah, and
repositioned.
I know
Okay.
exactly which one it is on 11.
I would agree, there's no,
It's right where the.
unless it's for the
we
interstate,
exit.
I would agree. I think taking that down would be a benefit to the neighborhood and to the city.
That's,
It's in the wrong corridor, because it's not
It's
on the
right
today.
there by the strip center.
yes, ma'am.
I think that would be a benefit. That would be viewed as a
From my
benefit.
point of view, it is it's starting to get the signs down, which was the intent of what we wanted to do. What the previous council, yes, this is a new day, yes, but the thing is, I look long-term in terms of what do we want the city to look like visually when people drive in. And as I shared with you when we met, when you asked for a meeting with Mary and I, is that when I fly into Los Angeles and take that freeway from Los Angeles into Orange County, boy, Los Angeles has a whole lot of billboards, but you get into Orange County and there is not one billboard. And you can see the difference, and yet it's a very prosperous community. And the businesses and everything. So, it's not, it's about what we want our community to look like and how we zone that. And so, members of the council, that's what I'm looking at long-term. How do we want our community to look like? What I don't want to see, if we open a door, then everybody would come in and this would become a billboard sign farm. And I'm not hearing you say that.
No.
You're one of.
That's not.
That's
not true.
Yeah, that's not,
No,
I
but-
don't think that statement is fair
No,
of this
but-
conversation,
No.
or any. Please, you have to
No.
retract that statement, Madam Mayor.
No, but I
We are
just-
not even close to talking about becoming a sign farm here.
Yeah.
That is
But
inflammatory
I said,
remarks
one
don't
of the things
appreciate.
that, when that was first introduced, I
Come on.
didn't want that to be.
Madam Mayor?
Yes, Mary.
Let's go back to what you were saying about what this would look like. I think I told you, gentlemen, and I think I mentioned it at the last meeting. I mean, I know your side of the fence. I used to buy media. I know the effect of the billboards. Very, very strong. I've bought billboard space in another life that I led. And, but I also know the name of the game is traffic count. So that's why I know why the one on County 11 is, you can live without that. The traffic count is there, but it's not the same kind that you get, high volume you get on the interstates. But to your point about what does this county want, this want to look like, I'd like to call this out for anybody who's watching, but because these are communities where billboards of any kind are prohibited. Apple Valley. Eden Prairie. Edina. Mendota Heights. St. Louis Park. And do they know something we don't know? They're concerned about their image as well. That's why they don't allow them, or in St. Louis Park's case, they don't allow them anymore. So I think these are communities that have a vision for the image they want. And it's always a conflict. I mean, you can talk about free market and you can talk about rigid controls. They always come into collision. And not always, but often come into collision, and they're colliding here. I have to come down on the idea of what the image of the community is. And as Mrs. Foster pointed out, it is an image that makes an impression when people drive into our community. And I think that the ordinance that was put in, when it was put in with good reason. If we are going to change this in any way, I don't want 5 people, 2 of whom may not be here in a year, making this decision right now. I think that it's something that probably should be studied, talked about, and explored again to see, as I had raised that question, what fundamentals have changed to make us want to change our ordinance and our policy.
Bill?
Just to be fair, for the argument, for the citizens, the cities do allow the dynamic signs include Blaine, Coon Rapids, Egan, Maplewood, Minnetonka, and West St. Paul. So it's about 50-50 on the list that we've been presented with, so.
It's 50-50, but I'm assuming our citizens have been in those other communities.
Is that a slam on Minnetonka?
You may interpret that as you like.
No. Okay, Dan Keegan and Dan Gustafson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm going to just respond to a couple comments that were made. I am sensitive as anybody to the view of our river valley. We have an interstate highway and we have 4 billboards. They are what they are. They don't exactly enhance the view of the river valley. But they're not going to be the only thing that we're going to be staring at 20 years from now. When the MRQ gets developed, the building heights are going to take away the western half of that river valley view. So, should we not develop the MRQ because it's going to be a blockade to the western half as you drive north? No, of course, we're going to develop it and we're going to lose that vision. So, I am not, and I want to make this very clear, I didn't bring this up because I wanted to add more billboards to the city of Burnsville. I don't. There is no reason for us to
Okay.
add any.
Okay.
I like Clear Channel's proposal to eliminate one that I believe is in the
Well,
wrong district.
Because I offered to, if you're going to want one, then take two down.
And
Put two up, two down.
I'm in agreement from a discussion standpoint to go down that road because I think there's something there.
Yeah.
And it kind of fits in what they're proposing with this setback rule. It doesn't really, it does knock one out, potentially. So we have some work to do to get this done right, so it respects the idea of we're not adding, and it could actually benefit us from the standpoint of taking one out that I think is in the wrong spot, although I don't remember seeing it every time I drive past it every day, because I'm not looking up that way. But the other issue I wanted to touch on is, Councilmember Sherry, you brought up, and I want to make sure we're on the same page as far as the interpretation of Mr. Eveling's comments. The city to issue a land use in exchange for, or for any consideration of monetary, was the way I took that. PSA announcements, I don't look as monetary compensation because they're
Public service
they're
announcements.
for the greater good of the public, but there is, I understand where you may be coming from. If we're going to advertise our festivals, the city could get some indirect benefit from that, or the PAC, the city owns, so there is some ticket revenue benefit that we could get out of getting some advertisement on that billboard for a city-owned. So there is an indirect tie of revenue there, but it wouldn't be, I think what Mr. Eveling was getting at is more like our cell tower lease, where we're saying you can go there, but we're taking rental. We're taking in monthly monetary revenue or annual revenue from it. That I have an issue with as well, unless it's on city property, but taking that revenue when it's put on a private property. So I'm okay with Clear Channel or anybody coming to the table and offering up PSA announcements that we can put up. I Love Burnsville Week, events going on at the PAC. I don't view that as direct revenue payment for allowing the billboard to be LED versus paper. And I think PSAs speak for themselves for the most part. Amber Alerts, FBI, et cetera. Severe warnings, storm warnings, which that would help us. We've had a few of those lately. So anyway, I just want to, I took
But
that comment as sort
No,
of that direct
what
cash
I'm-
payment.
Yeah, what I'm saying is, I think that, first of all, that's valuable. That's valuable real estate up on those signs. They charge a lot of money for
Yeah.
that stuff. So they give something to the city for that. Does This Week newspaper give us free ads for our things? No. They don't.
PSAs?
They might do just PSAs of but in a general sense. But do they advertise art and all that jazz for free, Dan?
No.
Nope.
Does-
But they
So-
write several articles about it.
Pardon?
They write several articles.
Yeah,
Yeah, they
okay.
give us indirect.
We give them a
Well,
lot
They
of
give us
content.
earned media.
Right, content or copy is that's a different
And to
case.
your point,
But I mean, I think that we
content,
have to
yeah.
be very careful about that because it does look like, in my way of structuring things, it could look very suspect. And I don't think that's healthy. I don't think it's good. I don't think it's
Right.
ethical.
I'm comfortable with the existing precedent set by the other cities that utilize these PSAs
I'm not.
for storm.
I'm not.
For.
No way.
Community events, because, you have to now talk about Comcast Cable, and, they sell ads, but we, through a mechanism of taxation,
Whole
this
different,
is being
whole different
viewed
thing.
on a channel
Yeah.
that you have to,
I think
So,
our
anyway.
discussion, if we stay on the zoning piece, allows us, and we've set those things aside. I'm going to go to Dan first and then to Bill.
Just a couple of things.
could I finish?
Oh, you're not done
you
yet.
weren't-
I'm sorry,
oh,
Dan.
okay, I'm
No.
sorry.
I engaged Councilmember Sherry,
Let's-
and, because I was responding for her, but
Okay,
I wasn't finished. So, the bottom line is, this is not an addition. I think there's a net reduction
And I'm looking
of a
for a
couple
net
in there.
reduction.
And I think there's a compromise where we can get an upgrade in the billboards. We can become part of the Amber Alert and the FBI and the severe storm warning and the PSAs. We can have the benefit. Quite frankly, anybody looking at this billboard wrapped in limestone block compared to the existing billboard
Seen them.
and saying that they are not appealing,
Mary, let's
I have
have
to,
it
que- you
finished.
know, this is an upgrade
Oh.
from the existing. So what we have is the existing. I'd much rather have
No,
a
because they
monument.
need-
I'd rather have Burnsville's logo on it. That is a lot more attractive than a steel pipe
Okay,
They-
painted brown.
They need so much more
okay.
structure.
We'll go
So
around.
anyway,
So,
I think there's a way to get to this that can,
Yeah. and I'm
Get
looking
everybody
from
to
zoning and reduction.
yeah, and it's not
Okay,
just Clear Channel, it's
it's
whoever other.
CBS,
It's
so
whatever other players that are in the
Because
market.
I want to get to the policy once we have the zoning discussion. So all of those fringe benefits, I would like for us to just set aside for now, and let's talk about the zoning and the reduction. Dan?
I just want to comment on a couple things, Mary.
Yeah.
The MRQ is not going to change for many, many years. We know with the recession, the trash dump is going to stay for a lot longer. With things that are happening, we all know that's going to stay longer. We know Kramer Mining, it's going to go out probably another 15 or 20 years. There's a lot of things that are not going to change down there. And I agree, when you drive in from the north into Burnsville, the first thing you see is the salt barges sitting on the river, and then you see a mining operation, and you see a blacktop operation. I don't see any of that going away anytime soon, and it's maybe 20 or 30 years before it does go away. We've already engaged in discussing, what do we do in the interim? What do we do in the interim for our landowners down there and that sort of thing? Quite frankly, a monument-type LED board down there could be an improvement to what you actually see coming into the valley, as opposed to all the industry that's just sitting down there, because that's what you're looking at when you come in Burnsville today. There's no monument sign. We're going to talk about monument signs next month. We're going to talk about spending money on monument signs next month. I mean,
That's,
this kind of kills that, to take that discussion away. I don't know. But, I mean, there are lots of things coming up that we need to talk about. The other thing you said that I have to take a little exception with is, yes, I'm not going to be here next year, and you two might not be here next year, and that
We
doesn't.
may not.
But that doesn't mean that we wait till the next council gets into place to make votes. This council has taken many votes with the people that hold their certificates, and that's what we're here to do. And
well, I agree,
so
but
we
I
don't
think
wait.
this
We don't
is-
wait for a new council to come in to make decisions.
Okay, Bill,
But-
and then Mary.
Oh.
Because Bill is on.
Couple.
I have a list
Yeah.
of who's coming.
Just a couple comments. First of all, I think Mary's done a good job advocating her side. She's thrown in everything, including the kitchen sink. I feel like
Not quite.
I'm in
I've got that next.
I feel like I'm in
It's
it's kind of an illegal argument, and so forgive me, Mayor, just to deviate for a second, because in my world, suggesting that the city doing something unethical is important, even though it doesn't address the zoning. So I think the argument that the other cities, Minnetonka, Egan, et cetera, certainly, they are, we could have a difference of opinion about how we go about stuff or whatever, but I strongly disagree that if we think, some of us think that that somehow, if the city gets an indirect benefit through this process, that somehow that's unethical, that I strongly disagree with that. And obviously other cities, as Dan mentioned, and the cities I mentioned have faced that, and I don't believe they operate in an unethical way. We may have a gentleman and ladies disagreement about a respectful one, but I strongly object to someone characterizing it as in fact unethical. And with that, that's all I have to say.
Well, if I could respond, we do get a direct benefit, Bill.
If-
We get a direct, not an indirect benefit, we get a direct benefit.
But I
And
don't-
I think that's questionable. How about if you
Yeah,
frame it that way?
I can live with questionable, because
Questionable.
unethical is a whole different
Ethically
level
questionable.
of different behavior.
Let
Anyway,
me-
well, if I.
Mary, do you have,
Just one thing that, about making policy. I think the reason that I'm concerned about this is that we make decisions sometimes that are going to affect this community for 50 to 100 years, and this is one of them. And so that's why I would rather not I mean, I'd rather take some time to make those decisions. And I think this is something we ought to think about.
Okay, let me ask this question, because there is a process that we have gone through in the past, and it's a process that we can do, but let me ask this question. One of the things that we do when we're looking at policy that are of this magnitude, that has a direct impact, where there is a lot of disagreements and that there is a split. One of the things that we have done is ask our staff to convene a group of citizens, and then they would look into that issue, and then it goes to the Economic Development Commission, to the Planning Commission, and then to us. I know, Tom, you said you spent 3 years with Blaine as you went through this process. What I'm looking at is some reduction in all of this. If you're going to put up, it looks nice. It's beautiful, and the logo and all of that. It looks fun. It's a new product. But for me, long-term is that what will our community look like? That's my concern. And what is it that we want for the community? So the question I bring to you, members of the council, is that we can, because that's an option that's available to us. Do you want to convene the community and look at this issue, and then have it go through our process to the Economic Development Commission, to the Planning Commission, and then to us? What would you like to do? Because if you say we just move ahead, then then we have that discussion now, because then I would like to move to reducing, not just from the Clear Channel, but also on all the other billboards. If you put up this, they take one down. So if you're going to look at a policy level. So let me ask the first question. Do we go with a process where we convene the community and go through each of the commissions to come to us with a recommendation?
I would be more comfortable with that because of the comment I just made, and that is, this decision will affect our community for the next 50 or longer years. And I think that it's something that we should take more in study, and it should get more points of view than we have at this table.
It's something we've done with the rental license, we've done with smoking and alcohol and other things, so that's one of our best practices. So you would like, Bill?
I vote that we move forward.
Okay. Dan?
I would vote to move forward, and on this basis, we're actually reducing. We're heading in the direction that actually responds to the community's comments, which hasn't been hundreds, it's been a handful, but the feedback that we've gotten to say, we generally don't want billboards, but if we could have less, that's better than what we have today. And that's the direction we're heading. So I think we've already actually are heading in the direction that the voices that we've heard are pushing us. And so I think we just need to work out the details and make a decision.
Well, I appreciate that, because that wasn't what they came with. They came with a net of 9.
Oh,
And
right,
so,
yeah.
and then
I
when I
understand.
asked that I want
Sure.
two new ones, 2 out, and then you said that you can do 1 out, because the other one you have partners on.
If I can, let me offer this. Let's have the discussion that we're talking about. My understanding of this process is to talk about the generals and then get with staff to talk about it
Well,
as a go forward.
yeah, because this is not just you.
No, I
No, but
understand and
if
respect.
we're going to, because now it comes to zoning and LEDs and all of that, because now we're looking, I'm just moving our discussion to, because it's not just going to be you, it's going to be CBS and all of them, and they should be at the table.
Absolutely.
They should be at the table if they choose to be at the table. I don't
I don't
disagree
know,
with
but the
that.
thing is, when we put this ordinance in place where there's a reduction, you put 1 LED up, you take 1 down, or you put 2 out, I don't know, but.
We can
at
have that
least-
discussion.
Yeah. Dan?
I agree, we should move forward with staff working on this. And
Okay, so here's the next piece. Members of the council, I think we should direct staff then to take a look at, if we're going to have LEDs, then we should look at continuously reducing the number of billboards in the city. If you're going to put up a big LED sign, then one comes down, and direct staff and the business to move in that direction. Are you in favor of this? Okay,
Yes.
okay. Mary?
Reluctantly, yes.
Well, I'm just trying to
Yeah.
reduce the number of billboards. I'm looking at what this city is going to
I'd
look
rather
like.
have a long-term study,
Yeah.
but that's okay.
Yep, I just,
Okay.
we'll have staff work with them to put together what they can and bring it back.
Yeah, as
Yeah.
I mentioned earlier, I'm open to having that as part of the discussion. It may not mathematically be perfect, but it's in the right direction.
It's
you
in
know.
a direction of
There may
reducing.
be, it may be not exactly a 2-for-1,
Yeah.
but a reduction
Yeah.
for a change, and I think that gives staff a better idea what we're looking for.
Yeah. Jenny, do you have, you're going to have to be meeting, and I would suggest that the invitation goes out to CBS as well, because they're the ones who also own billboards in the city. Is there anyone else who owns billboards in the city?
We can check. There may be one other vendor, I'm not quite sure.
Young, probably.
Well, the Youngs, it's in a PUD.
Okay.
We know that that's going to come down when Mrs. Young dies.
Yep, I think that would be the only two then.
I do have a
3, she has 3.
Is it
Just
7, 8, and what other one does she have?
She has 7, 8, and 6.
13 and 122nd, yeah. Madam Mayor, I have another, just a question on the direction piece. Knowing that they'd like to put this other billboard in the MRQ, and do you still want a provision that it come down when development happens?
Oh, yeah.
Or no?
Yes, we're not changing anything. We're just,
We're going to have that discussion.
We'll have that
That's-
discussion.
You're not making that
We'll have
decision.
that discussion.
okay,
Right.
okay.
No,
I
we're
did
having
not.
that discussion.
Okay, you want to have that discussion in terms of changing the ordinance?
Yes.
Okay, in the zoning,
Absolutely.
because is that?
Well, then
Well, wait a
I
minute.
want a study group. I mean, if we're going to change the ordinance rather than just make an accommodation for this, I want a study group for a year.
Just
I
like we
mean,
do
or a
signs.
year or whatever. I mean, this is big. This is a big change. It really does impact the whole community. It impacts the whole look. And look at, even though Bill read the list of these distinguished cities, excuse my inflection, but that allow these, I mean, look at the ones who are now shutting them down. I mean, I really don't want to see our underlying ordinance changed, and I thought that's what you were saying, Dan.
No, we're taking a look at the whole thing. We're talking about the land use and the.
Yeah, which
We're not-
is,
This is zoning.
This is
Yeah,
this
yeah.
is
But
a
that's
change from
policy.
an automatic phase-out to what is realistic. As Dan pointed out earlier, the
But-
ones along I-35, that could be there for 20 more years
That's-
plus. So.
That's right.
Before that land gets developed. But I think that needs to be part of the discussion, not just carte blanche, we're not going to even touch that.
Well, let's just also take a look. South of the railroad, there's a possibility that can start developing
Very
sooner
soon.
than the north of the railroad. And remember,
What
when
parcels are you talking about?
south of the railroad,
Right, near the-
between 13
by the
and the
Knox-
railroad.
Where
the
number
Knox
4 is?
property.
Just
Oh, yes, where number
say
4.
the number. and that-
Yeah, where number
easier to
4
find on
is.
the map.
Yeah, where number 4 is. And all of the work that's going to happen when we do 5 and 13, all of that soil is going to go to correct that. So
Those
there-
two possibles,
Those are
yeah, To me,
possibilities.
that we're having a discussion that I think we need to have about this. Those two may likely fall right into our existing ordinance, and I'm okay with that if that's
Yeah.
a discussion. I just don't want to say that carte blanche, that we're not touching that. I want that to be part of this discussion.
You want, okay,
Of the
because
ordinance.
I thought that we were just looking at the part of the ordinance that says if you're going to put up a billboard, you take down one, and not touching the ordinance as we have it today.
But I think if I'm CBS or Clear Channel, I'm not going to put a huge investment if it's going to be developed in 5 years. Then that particular location's off the table.
But then they wouldn't, they wouldn't put up one of those signs there.
Right, so we need to know the full scope of what this is going to entail, and when we believe these properties are going to be developed. And they need to know that too, and I'm sure they're interested in that as well, CBS. And so if it comes out after that discussion that everything needs to stay the same as far as when they are going to be retired, then so be it. But I just don't want to say, well, we're just going to leave that alone and deal strictly with the
Okay.
numbers.
So then I misunderstood you, because then then like Mary, just like with all the other sign ordinance, when it has that kind of impact on what we have on the books right now, then it needs to have a bigger review. And it should go through our other commissions, because
Well-
now we're touching the ordinance, where before we were saying, okay, if you're going to put up a LED sign on one, you take down 9. And now I'm hearing you say, no, let's also review the land use and the ordinance,
Right.
where some, 1 and 2 already are in a PUD.
Sure. I'll get right to my point, okay? Just for clarity. And we can decide what we want to do going forward. The sites along Interstate I-35, in that area, that is the area that billboards really belong. Even if some of those get developed, I'm not so certain that I would agree with acing out the billboard just because the land gets developed. I think they're more appropriate there than anywhere else. I would rather have number 9 taken out. I'd rather have number 5 taken out. I'd rather have number 6 taken out. If any place, they belong along the interstate. That's it. I'd rather not have them in the rest of the city. So from my perspective, I want that discussion to happen because I don't agree with the current ordinance. So if the 4 of you agree with the current ordinance, I'm okay with that. I'm outvoted. But I want that discussion because I don't agree with it. Okay? That's why I want that part of the discussion.
Okay. Are you okay with touching the whole ordinance as it stands?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay. Then,
Madam
Jenny?
Mayor, we'll bring options based on the discussion here and based on Clear Channel's proposal with some ways to make things work for them. That's kind of what I'm hearing.
and I would like staff to really take a look at that, 1, 2, 3, and 4. Because I agree, if you take down 6, 9, 5, 7, well, 6, 7, and 8 are already in a PUD. And they'll come down, the agreement is already there. So the only other one that would be left is 5, because if we go with what you say we can do, we can take down 9. So, but also with the ordinance, I really would like to understand the ordinance for 1, 2, 3, and 4.
I'm with you. That's
Because,
Precisely where we're
and the thing that I am concerned about is that let's make sure that when we're looking at 4, long-term, if you've got a manufacturing that wants to come into that area, they would not want to have obstructions, or they might have some nice things that they want to put there, and
like a
we have to-
ballpark, maybe?
Who knows? Who
We
knows?
actually talked to the ballpark people at one point
Yeah.
about that.
Who knows? But the thing
Wouldn't that be
is-
between the landowner and the billboard people anyways?
No, it has more to do with what our zoning is going to be.
Oh, I understand that, but if something nice wants to come in and the billboard needs to go away for something nice to come in, that would be between the landowner and the billboard company to make that decision, not ours.
No, our zoning says if you redevelop, it
No, I
comes down.
I understand what it
And that's
says.
the ordinance as it is today.
I understand what it says.
Yeah, but, yeah. Craig?
Madam Mayor, then we'll return back to council work session.
Yes.
As soon as we can.
Yeah, well, as you gather, and I understand that you've got a lot on your plate with everything that we're going through. But right now, what we're going to do is that you're going to convene the folks from Clear Channel, CBS, and whoever else. And the direction is reduction.
And that's about as general as we're going to get, because I'm hearing 2 different sides being espoused here about the principal use provision
Yes.
of the ordinance. The principal use provision as it stands in the ordinance now would preclude the situation that we just said there, as in a manufacturing building comes there and we preserve
Yeah.
the presence of a billboard. And I heard you say, Mayor, that stands in place, and I heard Councilmember Keeley say, no, it doesn't.
Yeah,
So I
and
think we're going to come back with options, and
that's right.
that's going to be on the table for your discussion.
That's right. That's a discussion item, because I think we have to be sensitive about what are the possibilities for this community, and I don't want to lock us out. Mary?
Madam Mayor, I think there's another thing we should be sensitive to, and that is the fact that there have been other property owners who have taken down their billboards. And because
very
of the policy and the changes that were made when that ordinance was established. So there is a fairness issue, and I understand you can't be perfectly fair all the time with everything. But I think that if I had taken down a billboard, knowing how lucrative they are, and they are extremely lucrative, I'd be mad.
Okay. Staff, you have direction?
Yes, ma'am.
Reduction.
May I ask,
Yes.
from a process standpoint, what would be our next steps and timeline? I'm trying to
Our
find
staff
capital.
will work that out with you with the schedule. And you'll be coming back to a work session, but we're going to have to it's not just about you, it's about land use and it's about the others who also own billboards in this city.
With respect, I certainly understand that. What I'm trying to do is plan capital for the year. We've got capital requirements that come into play here, and we're
Sure.
in June.
I think
so I'm
that's
trying to
something
figure
that you
out.
can talk with our staff, and then they'll give you the timeline,
Okay.
okay?
I'd like to see staff come back with whatever they've agreed to with Clear Channel at that next meeting, so that we're not wasting a lot of time going to a bunch of meetings on this as well.
What do you
So,
mean?
well, if they can work something with staff, and this is what the deal's gonna be, then come back with the deal and let us know what it is.
Well, because
Okay.
there's other folks involved.
I understand, we brought some other folks in, but this is this company trying to do something in our city, and now we brought a second company in,
No,
and I'm
no,
not
it's
comfortable
about
having.
zoning.
I understand that, but they're still talking about what they can do with the billboards and that, and I don't think another company needs to be in the negotiations with Clear Channel and our staff. They may be in discussions about zoning, but
Well, Mayor,
Mr. Jemnick is
Mayor-
our attorney.
Mayor and
please.
council, eventually you're gonna have a zoning ordinance proposal. They'll have to go through the planning commission hearing process,
Yeah,
and then we'll come back to the council. We aren't negotiating a contract with Clear Channel. We're talking about outlines. And some of the issues we've discussed tonight, such as the Minnetonka swap-out provision.
Yeah.
That was a judicial settlement provision. I'm not sure to what extent that a similar provision has been crafted in an ordinance requiring a reduction as a condition of a non-conforming conversion, particularly in light of some of the changes to the eminent domain statute of the last several years, which indicate that when you do those things, we have to pay compensation for the value of that sign. So I don't know if any city has, if Clear Channel's worked with any city that's put a swap-out reduction in the ordinance provisions, but that's something we'll have to look at as well.
yeah, and so those are all the issues, and they have to work on that, and we have to allow our staff to work on that. And in all due respect to the gentlemen from Clear Channel, it's a business decision for you. It's a long-term decision for our community with regard to our land use and ordinance. So I would say to you, when you're planning your capital, I work with our staff, and they'll tell you what it is. Your goals are different from our goals. Ours is long-term. You make a commission when you put up with those signs.
Well,
And for us,
it's not
we're
about a
gonna live with
commission
the
for the sign.
consequences.
Our goals are long-term too.
Yeah.
These things we plan on being for 20
Yeah.
years, whether they are or not
Yeah.
remains to be seen.
Yeah.
But my goal from a business person standpoint, and we've got advertisers that would like to advertise on these signs in this community, if you're telling me next year, then it would be good to know that. If you're telling me this is a process that comes back in a month, that would also be good to know.
Well,
That's all I was asking.
We have a work session, Craig, and our work sessions are already scheduled with items. You've already been brought in to, and here we are at 8 o'clock, and we haven't even gone through all of the items on our agenda. So please don't push. I mean, our staff will be working with you. Our staff will work with you, and then you will have what that schedule would look like. Because, Craig, you already have the items for the July work session.
Well, Madam Mayor and council members, we work off the list. That, of course,
Yeah.
it comes from the all-day work session and then other things that we're instructed to do before. We'll work on this as fast as we can because we perceive the council
Yeah.
does want to process it as soon as you can. I think July will be really difficult.
Yeah.
We're kind of working really hard and getting ready for July now. I
And we've
think
got
that
budget.
August might be a possibility. August is typically a budget meeting as well, but we would work towards a goal of August.
Yeah. Please understand, this is a very busy time for us. We get into budgets at this time, and every meeting we have is about that budget. So understand our process, please. Okay, Dan?
With all due respect to Clear Channel, I mean, we're talking about, and I understand where Councilmember Gus was coming from, is we have application,
Nope.
an intent for an application or a change or a request in front of us. We get that all the time, and we try and work with it as quick as we possibly can, and that's what we're going to do here. We don't exactly know the timeline, but we might be able to give an estimation nothing more than an estimation based on the normal time it takes to get something through planning commission, through staff, through planning commission, public hearing, and then back to us.
Yeah.
What's
And
that
staff can
typically
tell them
in
all of
months?
that.
Yeah, what is that typically in months? For the
When-
benefit of all of us.
When we get an application, the quickest is 60 days. Usually, most applications are done 60 to 72 days.
Yeah.
And
But
we've
you're
got a
going
ways
to
to
add
go to
this
get
other
there.
part where you're going to,
There's
and then you'll come back to us
Zone
after
work.
you.
there's a
have-
lot of work to be done before we
Yeah.
get to an application stage, just because of the
So
direction that's being
it's
going.
probably a fall kind of thing, and, there's no guarantee that we'd get it done in this calendar year, but it's.
understood.
It's a fall kind of
Thank you.
thing, late
Yeah.
fall.
I understand. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for hearing us tonight.
Okay.
Thanks for your time. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Okay, the next item on the agenda is property maintenance code enforcement. Jenny, it's you again.
I might have to send out for midnight snack.
No kidding.
I think we should send out for brownies. We need a little sugar to keep us going.
That's why I knew this was going to be late, so I went and got coffee, and I don't usually do it. And I have to be up at 3.
You gotta get up at 3 to catch a 6 o'clock flight.
Oh, that's always,
They're always fun.
yeah.
I want to grab some coffee myself.
Can you?
Charts. Paper charts.
They're never, the
You
text
had a
is
big
ne-
LED display.
The text is never big enough, though, on that. Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the council. I'm just going to introduce the item. We have our work group on this, our inspector, Ron Anderson, our building official, Scott McCowan. And this item was discussed at the all-day retreat, and that's why this is coming before you this evening. We're going to split up our discussion. We had a lengthy background, and we're just going to run through some of the highlights, and then we'll be looking for some direction. We tried to format this similar to our rental license discussion that we had last month, so hopefully that made it easier for you to follow. And with that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Anderson to get us started.
Okay. Welcome, Ron.
I'm
We're
glad to
keeping
be
you
here.
working all the time.
Yes. Well, Madam Mayor, council members, city staff, and Joel.
And Joel.
And Joel. To our residents who are watching, Joel is our attorney.
He's not on the payroll per se directly. Outside consultant.
Yes, the property maintenance enforcement staff deals with many types of violations every year. The first slide here shows that, there was, the ordinance was adopted in 1998 based on the International Property Maintenance Code. And of that, of course, we right now have one full-time person, that's myself, and we have Ted Oakland working as a seasonal full-time help in that position. And I also have 5 volunteers that do follow-up inspections and some data entry and paperwork for me in the office. Right now, we've estimated that there's about 18,000 occupied parcels in the city, and each year we do an average of 1,200 new code cases.
Ron?
Yeah,
Mary?
I have a
Yes.
question about that 1,800.
Or 18,000.
Ron, does that include, when you said occupied, does that include the vacant single-family
Yes, it would.
housing? Okay, so in other words, they're owned, or they're owned by somebody,
Yeah.
right?
Madam Mayor, that's approximately how many utility bills that we issue.
Oh,
I think it's
okay.
right around 17. and
Okay, good.
change.
So that number doesn't fluctuate depending on foreclosures, that kind of stuff?
No, that's pretty static
Okay,
number.
thanks.
And of course, we then, with those number of properties, we average about 1,200 new code cases a year. We do approximately 2,800 inspections every year on those code cases. And we send out approximately 1,450 letters and issue about 32 citations every year. Slide number 2 is with the violations that we do notice every year. It varies from everything from, garbage cans and mowing of weeds through zoning of CUP and PUD enforcement. And we've got health nuisances in there with hoarding houses and trash houses, too many animals, illegal dumping, noise, leaves in streets, just a variety of issues and types of code issues that we deal with on a regular basis. Now, when we get a call in with a complaint about an ordinance violation, we go out and take a look at it and investigate, see if there is any validity to what they are saying. And at the same time that we're out there, of course, we're looking at the total property. We're not just looking at what they perceive to be the only violation on that property. So they may call us out for long grass. We may go out there and find rotted windows and a car parked off on a rock somewhere and, a junk pile in the side of the yard and other various things that we may find when we go out there, so. And then if we do find those things, we also check in that neighborhood to take a look at other properties to make sure that we're dealing fairly with the, immediate surrounding properties. So we're not just singling out one person for a code violation that their neighbor maybe has a grudge against them for. Then we have a policy that deals with the timelines that we process through the case itself. The first inspection is noted, and we issue a information letter warning informing them of what the ordinance is and asking for their compliance within a 10-day period. That's what the 10-10-7 is all about. We go back for reinspection, order another compliance period of 10 days, go back for a final inspection, order another 7-day period, and then if it's still not done, then we do issue citations after that period. But these 10-10-7s are a fluctuating type of timeline, because if we note that there's a situation that takes more time to complete, such as doing re-siding on a house or something like that, nobody's going to get that done in 27 days. So we do try to work with people for adjustments on those type of timelines. I got a little bit of a historical summary here on the next slide. And we go back to 2007 with this and have just got the last 5 years total. And if we extrapolate this year's subtotal so far, we're on par to equal 2011. But we've had a fluctuating amount, but it's pretty steady. The numbers for 2011 are a little skewed if you look at the trash cans and the addresses on houses, house numbering of properties. We had actual volunteers go out and canvass neighborhoods with the sticker program for trash cans, and we did include those numbers in here. And then we also had a volunteer that went through the neighborhoods and tried to help out the fire department getting addresses on all the houses. And they've, well, if we go to the next slide, it kind of explains that a little bit. We've got trash cans and address numbers were the two biggest ones. It was directly a result of the volunteer help on those areas.
Are our friendly reminders working?
I'll probably address that, Madam Mayor, when I get to my
Okay.
point, and I have a little,
Okay.
we can talk about that when Ron gets done.
Okay.
We do have some information on that.
Okay.
But the other issues, we had a lot of interior structure issues, which we don't normally get with property maintenance because it's only in rental properties where we get into the inside of units. And that's been addressed with the rental license ordinance work that was been done earlier for the work sessions. And, but you start out, then, you know, the ones that are truly effective as far as property maintenance goes, weeds is really high, exterior storage issues comes in next, health nuisance issues, which can have, you know, quite a few different things. Usually it's exterior dumping of brush and stuff like that. Compost piles end up in that type of thing also. We've got trailers and camping vehicle violations, parking surface violations, exterior structure violations, and the use of the parking area violations. Basically, that's expired plates and stuff on cars. Junk cars sitting out.
Okay.
I think I have the next couple of slides and to address your comment, Madam Mayor. The trash cans in October 2010, if you remember, we were addressed to kind of go with the friendly reminder campaign, if you want to call it that, for the trash cans. So at that time, we were directed by council to stop giving letters and issuing citations for that. So we did implement that, like I said, in October 2010. As Ron stated, the reason that those violations are higher is because we do have volunteers that actively do go through neighborhoods and not necessarily canvas, but if they get a complaint, they'll go through neighborhoods and they do place the stickers on those garbage cans. We're not quite sure exactly why the numbers are high. It can be from a variety of reasons, but I mean, one is the volunteers that do it. We're obviously getting more violations because they're actively doing it. One of the other issues could be is because there is more properties changing, not only because of floor closures, but the market is turning over and houses are selling. New residents come in, they're not aware of the ordinances, so they leave their garbage cans out. And then maybe a third issue that could be is there's a lot more conversions of residential properties into rental properties. And renters that rent residential properties, you know, terminate the lease, move out, new renters come in, they're not aware of the violation, so then they leave their cans out too. So to address your question, my comment is basically here as far as from a city, and I just put down a little comment, I said, is the friendly reminder working? And I said, or is the sticker just simply too friendly and residents don't take it serious? So I think we are, as from a staff level, we are looking for direction from the council and from you, Mayor, as far as like the direction to proceed. And I think at the end, that may be part of the questionnaire, so we can have the questions then too.
Bill?
I don't mean to give you a hard time. I still haven't heard. Does it work or doesn't work? Yes or no?
I can answer that.
Answer yes.
Since I'm out actually, you know, doing this enforcement and following up with the volunteers on it, I do see that it has a percentage effect, yes. The people do respond. 100% no, 50% no, but there is a good, you know, a nice
20%?
response. I'd say probably about 35 to 40% actually respond and do some.
Positive and take
Something
the
positive and-
garbage cans back and.
Yeah, move it
store
behind
them.
a shrubbery or actually, I did see quite a few people install the little picket fence type of enclosures around them and stuff too.
Okay.
In marketing terms, that's an overwhelming landslide success. Oh, my God. You don't get
35%.
30 and 40% on little notes in any other arena, so that's huge.
And it's positive.
It is. It's a nice, gentle.
It is positive, yes.
Okay, and our volunteers do such a nice job, and they go out and my concern is that because we just have you, and we just have Ted to help you in the summertime,
Yes,
and so, but the volunteers are doing the friendly reminders.
Right.
yes.
Okay.
Right. And I guess to maybe to address it even more, doesn't work. It's more of a winner from staff time and the amount of time, because before when we would go out, we'd find the violation, we'd actually write the letter for the violation, go out and follow up. So right now, I mean, it's pretty simple, and it's real cost effective from the city standpoint, because the volunteers are going out, they're placing the stickers so they can get multiple ones and canvass a whole neighborhood in a short amount of time. And it leaves staff to do more enforcement of the bigger items. So I guess, you know, in my opinion, it does work.
Okay.
But I may add one thing to that. And this is kind of important, because when you give them that friendly reminder and everything, and then you go out a couple weeks later and you have to write them up for a junk car and a brush pile and other things, now you've double dipped them, so to speak, with code enforcement. And I think most people would rather have it all in one fell swoop than, you know, being
Okay.
contacted by the city over and over.
Okay. Well, then you're going to have to, I think in some of your suggestions for tonight is how to get that at a one-time stop rather than several stops.
Yes.
So is that like multiple Post-it notes, friendly reminders on various things at the house, you know, numbers, the car, the garage, the trash cans, the weeds along the curb?
Okay.
In the background, we did address some proposed ordinance changes that staff would like, and these would be, you know, whether the council or the mayor decides to do a policy change and come up with more proactive approach. So kind of just highlight some of the top ones that maybe we could talk about, and some of them are more just like a policy. For example, the first one for the International Property Maintenance Code, we do base our property maintenance code off of that. It was adopted, I think, like Ron said, in 1998. So obviously code cycles change, so they have a 2012 copy out, which is the most current, and we could basically almost just adopt that inclusively and just put that as we do the building codes, and it would be pretty simple. That's what most cities do, and it's a international document, so it's pretty universal. So that would be one thing. Another thing that we would like to do is address some burned and damaged structures, because right now, in order to abate them or address them, we basically go through the administrative chapter of the building code, just the 1300 rule, which then it addresses the statute, which is 463. It's a long process. It goes through court, and it costs money, so we're looking at maybe more enforcement tools that we could use to get that. Another one is that we are looking for some direction as far as to allow docks and boats and stuff on riparian rear yards. And maybe what I'm thinking in my mind would be similar language than what we do with swimming pools. We have them operate, say, from May 31st through September 1st. We could come up with something that say, if you live on a lake or a butt property, you could have your dock and your boat. Because right now, the way the ordinance is written, you're not really supposed to do that. And we have had some issues of neighborhood disputes where they're calling and complaining on their neighbors, and technically, they're not allowed to have that on there, so it gets
Just
to be.
seems reasonable.
It seems reasonable, and from a staff standpoint, I mean, it's really a violation of the ordinance. We're just looking at direction to let, you know, we're looking for direction
So
on what.
amend the ordinance so that we have a reasonable,
Right, and have specific things that they can allow to have on their property for being a landowner.
during the season.
Exactly,
Okay.
yeah. Basically, more would be for the off-season, because what they want to do is they take their dock and their boat out and store it there
In the backyard.
in the backyard.
Right.
Another issue as far as maybe consider some additional modifications for outdoor storage.
Okay.
We have a question?
Bill?
Yeah, quick question. How many, just a wild guess, wild estimate, people in lakes do that? Is that more than 50% already do it?
I would say,
I'd say probably 90% or
90%.
Being a former owner of a lake property, absolutely positively. That's kind
All right.
of,
It's a reasonable
it's a
thing.
right
The
of
deal.
having a place on a
Okay.
lake to pull your
Just want-
boat out and your dock and just leave it
Sure.
Yeah.
on the ground and then shove it back in.
Yeah, it's just a reasonable thing that,
Agreed.
yeah. Craig?
Yeah, Mayor, in the interest, council is
Yeah.
the packed agenda tonight. I'm wondering if we could simply say, are you okay with 1 through 11?
You know,
Any of those, any of
anybody.
those alarm you?
No, I
And of course,
No,
you'll
I
see more
think
detail on these. as
they
we go
just
through.
all look very reasonable. It's things we should be addressing and amending our ordinance and really using the International Property Maintenance Code. Why haven't we done that? I mean, it's just reasonable.
well, then, in to respect everybody's time, we'll move on to the next one, and we can just go real quickly
Yeah.
through that. And I think this right here is, if you have the background, it's basically underneath of the inspection options, and kind of just to quickly move along, it you know, escalates towards the top. So basically, the bottom is like what we do right now, a complaint
Yeah.
basis. Obviously, the higher you get up the chart, the you know, the more staff time and the more resources it's going to cost. And so I think when we get to that point, maybe I'll just let Jenny talk about, you know, maybe different recovery costs or options that we're looking in. But on the charts and stuff, Jenny can talk about, but this kind of just goes from different things, from a complaint basis now to maybe the council suggesting proactive to look for certain violations. Basically, to the next one would be proactive to all violations from street view. And then, obviously, the highest and the most thorough approach would be to do a full exclusive inspection of front yards, side yards, rear yards, of all of it, more than just the street view. And obviously, the higher up you get, the more full-time employees that would be required to do that based on the canvassing every year, every other year, or however directions needed.
Okay. Mary?
If you went with one of the lesser ones, like the targeting all
Proactive
violations
certain
from the
violation.
street, would you still respond to a complaint
Mm-hmm.
if somebody said, oh, there's something in somebody's backyard? You would still do that, is that
Definitely,
correct?
yeah.
Okay.
Yes, what we would say is, in the background, it kind of says that no matter what proactive approach that we take, we would still
Complaint.
require the staff that's present to take the complaint basis, because those are never going to go away. So, I mean, you would still need that staffing level to do that, because
Right.
that's going to be continually.
Yeah, okay. thank
Because
you.
that's our other eyes and ears that help, because neighbors see things that our
Absolutely.
staff can't see, and then that's when they call and complain, because
Yeah.
they've been living with it for however long, and they want to see some change. Okay.
If I can continue here, so Scott kind of highlighted some inspection options, and we've got that on the chart in the background and in the spreadsheet behind Councilmember Sherry. There's also some options for enforcing and having the cost recovery component. That was something that you had asked for, should we decide to do this. There's two options in that regard. The first one is civil fines. The city can charge civil fines for noncompliance. We have great discretion in this area for doing this. We can charge different fines for different types of violations. So if we don't want to charge for trash cans or whatnot, but we can charge an amount for junk cars, and we can charge twice that amount for a siding violation or something like that. But anyways, we have great discretion on the types and amounts of civil fines. We can also establish those fines at any point in the process. Now, having this would also necessitate like an appeals process, and it would change our process a little bit from going right to district court and being a criminal violation to being more of a civil matter. So this may help in some enforcement cases that it's not a criminal violation. It gives a property owner the option to have a civil fine, which may be more expeditious and hopefully get resolution sooner. We think if we have some kind of fee or fine, that we're hopeful we'll get more compliance, because right now we don't. And a lot of people know how long it takes us to go through our due process before they actually have to comply. But the threat of a fine may cause people to take action sooner.
Get that, however, we need the LMC support to change the law, and there's a few hurdles. to
Correct.
get
The
Yeah.
only issue with this is the city does not have the ability to assess for unpaid fines. So if, we would have to go to district court to collect if someone didn't voluntarily pay. That's something we can do. But
It's just,
we're hoping to get the law changed because we're a statutory city, not a charter city. We need to get that changed. And the league is supportive of that change. It's just getting some legislators on board to get that change
well,
made.
and just to let you all know, and I think you saw my response to one of our residents, is that we have tried this year to get one of our, but because they were busy with other things, this was not on their priority. So it's on our docket to go back to the legislature and to work to get some enabling legislation for us to have these tools. But in the meantime,
Yeah. Or we could start that way and take unpaids to district court. So if we wanted to, we could do that.
Yeah.
The other option you have is to charge for services. Now, the city can charge for services that we provide to property owners, similar to when we mow the lawns. Ron sends out a company every now and again for people who don't mow their lawns. We send them a bill for that. If they don't pay, that comes before you on the assessment rolls, and we assess them for that. So we could charge for inspection services. We could charge at the first, second, or third, or with a citation. The caveat with that is we can only charge our costs, so it's not meant to be punitive. It's only to charge for the actual services rendered. And you
like pay as you go.
and you can assess that. So if someone doesn't pay, that would come before you on the tax rolls to be assessed to their properties. So what do these different models look like? Across, on the left-hand side of the bar, we have targeting violations from the street. That was one option that Scott had talked about. On the right-hand side of that bar down the middle, we have targeting all violations front and back, which is the most intensive approach. If you want to canvass the city every 3 years, just from the street, it would take one full-time person, 3 years, to cover all the neighborhoods in the city at a cost of $91,000 a year. How could we recover that if we did, I gave some examples there, civil fines, certain amounts, or charge for inspections. The bottom line is we can recover our costs in any of these models. It just comes down to how frequently you would like us to canvass neighborhoods and to what level of inspections. If we canvass just from the street every other year, so it takes us 2 years to canvass the whole city, it would take 1.5 FTE. If we were to do it every year from the street, 3. If we want to do complete inspections of everyone's property, front and back, every year, it would take 5 full-time inspectors. Every other year, half of that amount, and every third year, 2 of that amount. Again, in either scenario, we can completely capture the cost to do that.
Okay, Mary?
So this would be additional staff?
That's correct. I would highly suggest we keep the current staff that we have to deal with the complaints, because we'll still continue to get those.
Thank you.
Some considerations with these options, being proactive is a significant policy shift for how we have operated in the past. We have this policy, as you know, neighbor residents call, they complain, we go out, we investigate, and we follow up. There may be a perception, and we need to have a very strong communications plan when we're going into neighborhoods, what we're going to be looking for, to avoid people feeling like they're picked on. That's not what we want. We want compliance. We want our neighborhoods to be maintained at a certain standard. So we think communications would be a big part of that. There's a balance here in that fines and fees could and should result in better compliance, but we don't know how much better that will be for us. And we never know the level of violations that we have is an unknown. Unlike rental licensing, we know how many units we have, and we can kind of do the math and figure that out. This is not so easy to articulate. So the challenge is finding the balance between the appropriate staffing level and the amount of revenue that we think we can generate with fines or fees. So I just want to point that out. We've given it our best guess here based on our current violation rates and compliance rates. We did a sample canvassing of a neighborhood to determine approximately how many violations we'd find in a sample neighborhood, and we have our current compliance rates, so we know approximately how many would comply. But if you throw in a fee, hopefully we'd get better compliance.
Okay, Bill?
So is that, just 2 questions, is that something that you don't think could be handled through some volunteer process as is handled by inspections presently? And/or secondly, did you price factor in what it would cost maybe to outsource that? And would that cost the same?
Sure. First question about the volunteers. Our volunteers are great. I think one comes in every day for a couple hours, and this is very intensive work to go out and canvass the neighborhood. So to have volunteers do it and to have that consistency of what they're looking for, the same person, I think could be a challenge. Certainly giving them a project like the trash cans or address numbers has been very useful for us.
If I might just add real quick,
Sure.
it's like our volunteers, they don't do code enforcement inspections. They may do like a simple follow-up, like Ron may have them go out, and can you just verify that the vehicle's got a license on it? But they don't, have the knowledge about what the codes are and what the requirements are. So we don't have them do our first inspection or verify things, but we'll have them follow up and do simple inspections like that and sign things, but they don't do the actual code enforcement inspections for us.
The second part of your question, Councilmember Coughlin, to outsourcing or consultants, I think that possibility exists out there. So if it is less expensive, it could be, and then the fines and the cost to collect that back could be. I know it's out there, but the numbers I give you are for the highest. I guess they could be lower. I can't say that they will, but this would be if we had our own staff in-house doing it.
Okay.
So the discussion for you, as I've said before, is the frequency of the inspections, the types of inspections that you are interested in doing, and what cost recovery model you're interested in pursuing. If it's a civil fine, knowing we can't assess, we'd have to go to district court, or if it's fees for services for inspections. Any direction you give, we would incorporate into the budget process, and certainly we can come back and review this annually as part of our budget to see where we're at. And then there's the questions that were in your background. I won't go through those.
Okay. Any questions for staff? Okay, Mary?
No, I just want to thank staff. My goodness, this was a lot of work and a lot of thought. And it gave me a big picture of a problem that I think we all know exists there. And thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you. This is our team here, so.
Yeah, thank you, team.
Yeah.
So, volunteer.
Yeah, and the volunteers too. Dan?
I want to build on that question that Bill had about outsourcing. How much, I did a little research on the web today, and there's a lot of cities that outsource building inspections, certain types, like electrical, various different ones. Have we ever outsourced any of that in the past, or has it always been internal?
I could probably address that,
Okay.
Councilmember Keely. I mean,
Yeah.
most of the cities that outsource for inspections is, a lot of cities do the electrical inspections through the state electrical inspectors. The city of Burnsville has always pretty much had their own electrical inspector, and the amount of permits that we issue and the revenue and for that and stuff is, it easily pays for the electrical inspection. Most other cities, it's easier to contract out for building inspections and electrical inspections because those are statewide building codes and electrical codes, so they don't vary from city to city. So if you're an electrical inspector, you can do an inspection in any city because it's all the same code. They all adopt the NEC. Same thing for a lot of cities don't have their plumbing inspectors because the state of Minnesota doesn't have jurisdiction agreements anymore for plumbing inspectors. They don't issue them anymore. So the city of Burnsville is actually lucky that we have qualified staff and we get the jurisdiction agreement to have one because they don't allow those anymore. And so that's why you'll see most of the cities don't have their own plumbing inspectors just because the state won't allow them to have them. As far as for the zoning and the property maintenance inspections, there probably are companies that Jenny and I have looked into that do that as part of their building inspections. They will do the property maintenance inspection, but most of those companies actually represent the city as the building official too. So they're contract inspectors. So not to use names, but there's a couple big companies in town that have, they may have 10 to 25 cities that they actually are the building official, and they do all the code enforcement, even sometimes zoning enforcement for those cities.
Okay. Jenny and then Craig.
Madam Mayor, members of the council, I think we've talked about this before.
Yeah.
And as Scott said, the revenue that we get from the permits covers for those types of inspections the cost for plumbing and electrical. And our big benefit is we have that service right here. You can call up today and get the plumbing inspector out there if you have an emergency, and he'll stop by, or the electrical inspector. If we have a contractor, that may not be the case, or if we're dealing with the state. So we're able to provide a very high level of service by having those two positions that could be outsourced, or a building inspectors for that fact. We just have one building inspector, one electrical inspector, and one plumbing inspector.
And I've heard from developers when they come in, and that's why they think that we're very business friendly, is because our response time to getting those things inspected is much higher than others. And so that's the value that they see, is that when they need things inspected so they can move on and open their doors.
And Madam Mayor, if I can add to that, it's not just
Yeah,
the
Jenny.
response time, it's also the quality of the response. We have a great control and great quality people. You'll recall, I remember the story of the Perisoli Restaurant Group, and they talked about an experience they had in another city. They had a completely different experience here because of the staff that we had that went out and were willing to help them instead of telling them to go back and have their architect figure it out and 3 days later, submit for the change when we were able to help them on the spot.
Solve
So
it,
it's the
solve it on the,
quality.
on the spot.
It's the quality of the service in
Yeah.
addition to the cost, so.
Yeah. Okay. Bill?
But that's something, Jenny, you can get us the information on,
Yes.
on what that might cost, if there's any cost differential. Correct?
Okay. Craig?
Madam Mayor and council members, Jenny has identified, as it relates to the property maintenance code of it, I think, we're kind of talking about two different things here.
Yeah.
Building inspection is different, and as Mr. McCown said, that it gets a little bit dicier when you're dealing with a code that we have that's essentially different than any other codes. In spite of that, Ms. Faulkner has identified two companies that do this kind of thing. Now, integrating individuals into a staff presents some other issues. And the numbers that Ms. Faulkner has presented to us are a bit of a worst-case scenario if these were staff people and so on. There's some Fair Labor Standards Act provisions that we'd have to verify compliance with if we opted to go that way, because when you blend individual people working in a building, answering to supervisors, using city software systems and so on, there gets to be some issues there that we'd have to follow through on as well. If council determines that this is a concept that you're interested in doing, we will do just that.
Yeah.
And if we find that we're not wedded to the idea of doing this with public employees, if there's a viable way to do it that is cheaper with contractors. That's been Burnsville's history forever, and it probably always will be. So that's not something that we would anyway reject out of hand. We're just telling you that we don't know that that's workable right now, and what you see here, we think is the worst cost scenario.
And I think one of the things we should have a discussion on first and clear is that, do you want civil fines or fees? Because when we go civil fines, that's a longer process, and if we go to fees, then we can talk about how often. Because it's the intensity level, the frequency level. These are policy questions. How often do we want to get out and do this? And to Ron's report, how many, if you can put up your slide of how many that you did last year. I mean, you had a bar. I mean, so, yeah, that slide, the historical summary. A lot. Of the cases. And I know that there's a gentleman here that is very interested in this item because things have changed in Burnsville, and we're an older community, so we have a lot of things we have some challenges. So how are we going to solve that challenge? There are two tools that are available to us: civil fines or fees. Mary?
Madam Mayor, I'd like to just pick up a little bit about your point about the community changing. It's older, but it's also becoming more ethnically diverse, and it's also having a lot of rental properties in our single-family homes. And many of the people who are either purchasing or renting these homes don't really.
They don't know how to take care of the property.
Well, and it's not their culture. And so I would hope that as we change this policy and make it tighter, because I think we all are in agreement, well, we talked about this at the all day, that we really needed to work on this, that we figure out a way to bring people into that understanding of what a community standard is in terms of what's reasonable. And that's one of my concerns greatly. But
And as you saw, in my response to the gentleman, that, maybe we could work with the realtors, so when they're selling a house.
I think there are a lot
that
of ways.
There are some ways. Here's what you do to take care of your property, and here's the city's code and ordinance with how you should maintain your property. So I think it's an education piece and a piece
Absolutely.
where you mentor them, but I thought that what we can do is to help them understand what does it mean to be a good property owner?
But then there are people who've lived here for 40 years who, still feel this way. And I don't know, did you want to say something? Yeah, go ahead, sure.
Yes, please take.
Yeah.
No, it's getting late.
No, yes, because, you came out specifically because you have some concerns about what's going on, and you've been, you chose Burnsville, so welcome and thank you. And you will continue to live here, and we appreciate that, but you want this community to also look good.
I do. Good evening, everyone. I won't address everyone individually because I don't know who's all here, but I will say, and Joel, since that seems to be the precedent this evening.
But just so give your name.
My name is Bill Clark. I sent some of you an email to council members and Mayor Kotz. The rest of you probably don't know about it, but I would like to, I'm here because I want to verbally reinforce my email to you all and also give a citizen's perspective of this. I've lived here for 12 years. I love Burnsville. I love what you all do. Thank you for your service. I see some issues in my neighborhood that I think are probably similar throughout the city. And one of them has already been touched on a little bit, and that's the rental homes. And I've done a little reading on it, and evidently rental homes are on the rise for a number of reasons. One is the economy and people can't afford single-family homes, or single-family homes are selling for cheaper so more people can buy them and turn them into rental homes. And also evidently the homestead credit has changed a little bit, so it's more economically feasible to turn something into a rental, which is another issue. So first, let me ask you, as part of this, and I understand Burnsville has instituted a rental license. So I applaud that. As in that process, is there a cost for that license?
No, there is.
There is a cost to the license, yes.
Okay. I would, a suggestion, that rental process needs to be somewhat of an education process to the rental owner,
Yeah.
so that they understand that taking care of the structure and the lawn maintenance and everything is their responsibility.
Yeah.
Renters don't care. They don't care what they're,
Yeah.
I shouldn't say that, most renters don't care. It needs to be made clear to the owner during the license process that they alone are responsible
Yeah.
for what that looks like. And I'm not an attorney by trade, but I'm wondering whether there could be some type of escrow situation or some financial means to put them in a position where if they are given a citation, that money is already at the city, or at least have them educated so that they know if it's not kept up to the city's standards, that the city can impose a fee and they will be the ones that will be paying that.
Mr. Clark, that's what we're discussing tonight. If we go with the fee, it can go onto to their property tax if they don't pay
Okay,
it.
and that is the rental owner, correct?
It goes to the property
Yes.
owner.
Okay, this is the touchy issue here. A lot of those rental owners are immigrants, racial minorities, and I don't think a lot of them understand the requirements. So again, that needs to be an education process of what the ordinance is.
Yeah, and that's why when I responded to you, I said there's some education that we need to do, and maybe we can work with the realtors. Bill?
I'm not, Joel can correct me if I'm wrong, because I am a lawyer.
Okay.
But the way it will work for most people is that the bank, the mortgage holder will get notice, as well as the property owner, and they will be factored into whatever their monthly payment is, because banks do have an escrow, or mortgage companies have a certain escrow when they pay the property tax. And then so in a strange sort of way, that's how
It is
it will
escrow.
work.
Okay,
It is,
I
yeah.
understand.
As you said, the city just won't be involved in the escrow, the mortgage holder will. And if, at that point, the renter or the owner gets concerned because they see
Yeah.
that it costs more, then they will be educated.
Yeah,
Okay, yeah, I understand, thank you.
okay.
Also, as part of the education process, I guess, if they lose their license, can they no longer rent that property out? And what I'm getting at here is having this license is a huge fulcrum for the city. And you can leverage that by, and again, I'm not an attorney, but if they get multiple citations for a rental property that they are not keeping up, can their license be revoked and they no longer rent that property?
We have revoked a rental license.
Okay.
The big one is Country Village.
Okay, so that, well, but I mean individual, single-family homes as well?
They're governed by the same ordinance.
Okay, so to me, that would be a huge leverage for the city in keeping them to the ordinance so that they, and as part of the education process, they need to know that they can lose their license if they don't keep the property up. So, the other issue that I see, and this is again touchy, there's 3 houses near me that are disasters. And they are all people who have come from other countries. And I think part of it is, and Mary touched on this earlier, and I did in my email, I think it's a little bit of a cultural issue in that some people come here and they don't understand. And nothing against them, but I think an education process by the city, and I know this is a tough revenue time and all that, but is it possible, and I'll even say, I'll admit, I sometimes leave my trash can out, and until tonight, I didn't realize that was wrong. So, and thank
Well, you got educated. You would have gotten the friendly
Well, I didn't know, and I've lived here for 12 years.
Yeah.
And I speak, fluent English, and
Yeah.
So maybe, is it possible to, maybe this is cost prohibitive, but send some type of brochure or have some education process, not only for rentals, but for all of the citizens who own single-family homes, defining what the ordinance are, and especially highlight the changes, like if we get the noxious weed thing, so that they know, and then tell them that we're going to implement a program where you can be fined if you don't adhere to the ordinance.
That's a good suggestion. We've used that method before to educate our residents on
I
different
must have
things.
missed the brochure.
But not necessarily for how to maintain the property, but for other things. And so, Craig?
We have an ongoing, that's a great idea.
It's a
We
great
have an
idea,
ongoing
yeah.
campaign pretty much in every issue of the Burnsville Bulletin.
Yeah.
The top 10 things you should know about home maintenance and so on, but
Yeah.
I don't think you can ever overdo it.
No,
so.
Right.
I
Yeah.
don't either. And I think people take much more to friendly reminders than they do to getting a letter in the mail telling them that they're gonna have to pay $50. Although that is an education process too.
Yeah.
I recently got a ticket for not having my seatbelt on, and I usually wear it, but I didn't that day. And it cost me $130, and I'll tell you what, I don't move my car now without putting my seatbelt on.
Yeah.
And, you know, it isn't that I'm afraid of getting in an accident, it's that I don't want my wallet hit again. So, you know, that is part of the education process.
Okay.
So, I guess that's it, other than
Okay.
if you change the ordinances or want to really enforce the ordinances, I guess you have to have a structure in place like you're talking about, both inspectors and someone who's going to go do the work, whether it be a contractor or city employees. And
Yeah.
so,
Yeah.
thank you
Thank
so
you.
much for
And
letting
thank you
me
for
speak.
coming in and sharing your thoughts. Now, that was very courageous.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Okay, so, council, civil or fees? Fees, we can get that done, and it's an immediate. Civil fines, we go to court, and, yeah.
For me, it would be fees, at least at this stage, based on what our enforcement rates are.
Okay. Mary?
Well, I tend to agree, but I'm a little shaky in this area, so I guess I'd like to hear other council members' opinions as
Okay,
well.
okay, Dan?
I think fees would be the appropriate way to go.
Yeah.
Fees.
Dan? Yeah.
Okay.
The reason being is that when you go to civil fines, you're going to court, and then you're
Right.
gonna get all that other, and then it's gonna cost us,
but the-
and we need to get.
The downside, as Jenny pointed out, though, is that you don't have any punitive effect of the fees the way you can with the civil. That's the only thing. But I think overall, given the big picture,
Yeah.
this is
Yeah.
is fine.
We always can come back and visit it someday if our legislature gives us
Sure.
some greater authority.
Yeah, no, I'm not
Hopefully
arguing
that
against
we,
it.
but we need to do something now while we go through.
Right.
We don't know if the legislature, and we're going to continue to try. Steve Milkey, the administrator of Lakeville, and I are tasked to do that. And so we
Good.
will continue to do that and push for that. But in the meantime, we have a problem we have to solve.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, yes.
And Mayor, I want to make sure we don't lose something in semantics. We used a couple different words. We were talking about civil fines and charges for inspections. I heard the word fee going around. I think we're all talking about charges for inspections.
Charges for inspection,
Okay.
yes, that's how,
All right.
those are the, because we're charging a fee for each time
Good.
we're out there. So,
Understood.
charges for, so, yes.
And
Okay, the
frequencies, the
next,
other
the
question.
frequencies. Do you, once a year, here's the impacts that staff has given us. Do you want it to be just visible from the street? Or do you want them to be more intense in all violations? Let's do that first, and then go once a year, every other year, or every 3 years. Bill?
Well, for me, again, it'd be least intensive,
Yeah.
so it'd be every 3 years just from the street.
Okay. I think it's a good place to start.
Again, I have hesitation for instituting any new government somehow enforcement, but here we are again. We all know that Mr. Clark has not been the only complainant. We've had lots of people complaining to us by email. This has been repeated and repeated and repeated to all our citizens that will think this is somehow more government intrusion. We've had so many complaints about dandelions and yards and siding and stuff and cars and, on, that, again, here we are. And with that understanding, every third year from the street and still to look at what it may cost by outsourcing it.
Okay, Mary?
Well, one of the concerns I have is because we've been complaint-based, I think a lot of people are reluctant to complain. So I look at it as everyone who complains is how many citizens don't complain. Because I have people come up to me and finally will say, oh, and I say, well, have you called the city? No, I hate to complain. I think the problem is serious enough in this community and just by driving around that I would like to see it more frequent. And I had highlighted every other year. I'd love to go every year, but I don't think we can do it every year. I don't think we can afford it.
Okay, you're saying every other year?
Every other year.
Okay.
From the street side or?
From the street.
From the street.
As a starter.
It's visual appeal from the curb.
As a starter.
Yeah.
As a starter. Now, can we tweak it? Sure. But I think it's always better to start a little stronger than, you can taper, it's easier to taper back than to ramp, to ramp it up. Or to crank it up, I guess is a better way. So, I'd say every other year, if I could get you all to agree, which I don't think I could, I'd say every year.
Okay. Dan?
This is for all property in Burnville, correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
Commercial and residential.
Commercial and residential.
Rentals.
And
The rental and
and
homeownership.
everything.
And
Yeah.
everything.
All
Owns
property.
property.
This is all property.
You know,
This is
we,
property maintenance.
I think we laid down a good program on our rental licensing, which is a 3-year program, where we get around every 3 years to these rental properties. I don't know that I'd want to get around to the homes any quicker than we do the rental properties. And
Except there are a lot more of them.
well, there are, but if we still get it done every 3 years, the number doesn't really matter. It's being done every 3 years, and so I think the 3-year program would seem to work for me for the street.
From the street.
From the street.
Okay. Dan Healy?
I'm more than fine with 3 years, and I think that it's two kind of separate issues with the rental property and that type of inspection because of what happened with Country Village. And I know that we're getting into a different discussion for that, but I would like to, personally, I would like to outsource as much of this as possible because I think we're going to see, or we're going to find an initial wave of issues. And then I believe with this increased enforcement, we're going to see it tail off. And so I don't want to have an additional payroll burden on the city that we then have to deal with down the road. And that's primarily why I like the flexibility and the cost effectiveness and the oversight flexibility that you get in outsourcing this kind of stuff. But we're talking about one additional person. There's a lot of work to do. They will be very busy, whether they're an outsourced or an in-house employee. I want to frame this in the context of what citizens and businesses expect us to do as a city. This code enforcement, I believe, and you can just read the letters that we get from, like the gentleman who is here. Citizens and businesses look to the city to enforce a fair playing field and maintenance of property. There is no other agency that's going to do it. And so, much like streets that they look for us for, and water and sewer and parks, this falls under that core function and expectation of our taxpayers. So I don't have a problem putting more resources in it, because I think we took resources away when we were struggling financially back in '08 and '09 and '10. And it's not that things have changed, because they haven't changed for a lot of people. It's still a very difficult time, so we have to be very careful about how we do this. But I do believe, and I feel for this gentleman and other folks who've probably gotten disgusted with our lack of enforcement power and authority to rectify situations. People who take such wonderful care of their property, neighborhoods, but plopped in there, in between beautiful lawns, are dandelion gardens and wild weeds where the seedlings are blowing into their yard, and it's increasing the burden on the ones that are already taking care of their property to fight off the invasion of the weed blossoms coming from next door. I would not want to be in that situation, and I would expect the city, if I were one of those, I actually have the benefit of somebody who sprays a little more over into my property, so it cuts down on how much I have to spray. But I would be pounding my fist saying, do something.
Yeah.
And so I do want to respond. I want the property inspections, I want to put more resources in the inspections to enforce what we have on the books, because we have too many violators, and they've been violating for far too long, and they've come up with far too many lame excuses for why it's not getting done. And I feel for those people. And so I'm fully in support of this in the context of, this is what we are here to do. Enforce our, this is less about government creep, mission creep, or government expansion, and more about just doing what I believe people expect us to do here. There's a lot of other things that we used to do that we shouldn't have done. And I think we've called it all back to a very core function of what this city should do for its taxpayers and its citizens. And I definitely think we should outsource wherever we possibly can, because I don't want the payroll in this city to get any bigger. I'd rather see it get smaller. I like outsourcing. I think it gives you the ability, if you don't get good service from one, you fire them and get another one. So there's a lot of benefits there, but I think that has to be weighed against the actual cost savings, and there may or may not be any, but I'm in favor of the 3-year cycle.
3-year and visual from the street.
Yes, I prefer it to be back, but the street is where majority of the issues are. It's lawns, it's garbage cans, it's,
And it's siding of the houses and everything. Okay.
yeah. I think 90% of the issues can be addressed from the street side.
Yeah. But once you get in, you can also do the back side
Yeah.
if it really is
Except
bad.
for, hoarding. That takes a little more closer
Yes,
look.
Yes. Yeah. And similar to all the things that have been discussed, we've heard from our citizens, not only from emails, but they've come before us and stood at citizens' comments, frustrated with our process that takes, 3 to 7 years. So, like all of you, I think we have to do that. This is a great direction. Outsourcing it, and you're going to be looking into that and a price point. Going slowly, I disagree, Mary. I think our citizens will know if we go every third year, and whatever the fees and charges are that we're going to implement, I think if they don't see results, they're going to be okay with us intensifying that, because they expect us to take care and enforce the law, whether it's residential or business.
So you're saying
Go through
if every third year,
visibility from the street.
yeah, the only reason I'm pushing for every other year at this point is because I feel the problem is that serious in town.
It is
I
serious,
really
but
do.
let's see how it works, see how it goes with hiring or outsourcing this function, and see how it is. I don't know how much the companies would say that the charges is until you bring it back. Yeah, we would know. This is what you're saying it would cost us to run it. Okay, Bill.
I also think when our citizens see that we are doing this, that they may feel more freed up to call
And say,
and
"No, it's not
complain now
enough."
that we've added dandelions and some other new
I hope
issues.
that's the case,
and,
absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, and the fact that we be proactive rather than complaint-based,
Yeah.
because I think that's been, well, it was a nice way, friendly way to run things in the past. There was nothing wrong with it. I think times have changed.
Yeah, and I think our
we have to be
citizens
proactive.
really need to know that we had a process in place that was within our domain of our authority. Now we're trying to do something that is outside of our, that we can do it, it's still within our authority, but it's on a per charge for fees for the use of service, instead of going down the civil and the court route that took so long for us to go through. Dan?
We can't pass up the opportunity to let everyone know that there's an app that they can download on their smartphone, Request Tracker.
Yes.
Where they can snap a photo of
That's
the
right.
dandelions, the weeds, the unkept shrubbery, the garbage cans, send it in, and it's anonymous. So it's very easy to let our inspections department know of violations and call our attention to it without
Yeah.
being identified as the tattletale.
And that's what a lot of people fear.
Yes,
That
they don't want to be.
They really do. Even if they go on Request Tracker or Service Request, they really, they just truly fear that they're going to be identified as the narc.
Yeah, no one wants to be the bad guy, but they want
That's
the
right.
problem resolved, and that's our job to get the problem
Right.
resolved.
They do. So I think this is going in the right direction. I think our citizens are going to really like the direction because they're frustrated with us, and we're finding a different solution for this problem. And so let's go down this road, and we'll continue to work on the legislative side to see that we get more powers that will enable us to do a better job of enforcing. Jenny?
Madam Mayor, one last point of clarification before you move on. I assume you want us to continue using friendly reminders for trash cans?
Well, it appears that it works.
Okay.
I mean, it's not 100%, but that's great. I thought you were going to say 5-10% were responding to it.
Yeah,
Works great.
and if our volunteers are doing that, that's wonderful.
I think that's part of key of this, if we're going to start charging for a second time or third time out for trash can, if we just keep it friendly and have the volunteers do that,
Yeah.
that will probably be.
And also for our citizens to know that complaint base is still
Yes.
also valid, but we'll also have a proactive approach to this. And now we can also facilitate this in a more expeditious way, rather than the other way that we were used to doing it, where it had to go to court.
Well, and when they
It's a bluff.
complain, they are anonymous.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and also, I like the fact that we work with our citizens and being common sense. If they can't rectify a violation within the 10 days or whatever, you give them a little bit more leeway, but they have to show some progress.
Yes,
Yes.
definitely.
Okay, good. All right? Got direction?
Thank you.
All righty, thank you very much. Okay, the next item, this is Steve Albrecht and B.J. Jungman, our fire chief. Our public works director is Steve, and B.J. Jungman is our fire chief, and they're going to talk to us about our policy on the private hydrant inspection and maintenance. Steve?
Madam Mayor, members of the council, this is a very exciting topic for you after 2 hours of the Jenny Faulkner show. So we will definitely try to move through this quickly because we are rehashing some things that the council looked
That's
at
right.
6 months ago, so we won't dwell on those, but we do want to bring everybody up to speed. So tonight, we'll touch on briefly, refresh everyone's memory about the existing private water system issues that we have, specifically hydrants, where we left off with the council back in December of last year. And then we'll talk about the public input process we implemented between then and now, what our recommendation is, and how that impacts the STORES program, which we also have taken on, because these two things are intertwined. Private hydrants, water systems, just briefly updating everyone. Obviously, Burnsville, we've had them since the 1960s. About 30% of our system in Burnsville is private hydrants, just under 1,100 hydrants. And we'll touch on what those are for those in the audience, because you'd be stunned as we went through this public input process, just defining what a private hydrant and a public hydrant were was one of the main questions we got. And there were a lot of reasons that those types of systems were touched on. And we'll just briefly give a good example. And we've got a map here that shows, if you look at the top of the map, we've got a townhouse subdivision, and those yellow dots are actually private hydrants within that. And what that shows you is in the case of a private townhome subdivision where they have
That
private
Early Lake?
streets. Yes,
Yeah.
yep, Summit Shores. We've got situation with narrower roadways, and so for various reasons to allow the density in the townhomes, they had narrower roadways, and they put in a private water system, which doesn't require as large public easements because we're not accessing the system, and so that allowed them to put in private hydrants, and so that's an example of a multifamily reason for doing it. If you look down in the lower left corner, you'll see some commercial areas, and in both of those cases, we have the fire protection systems for those commercial buildings have hydrants on it to meet the fire code for those facilities. Now, the rest of the map, it's a little hard to see, but you'll see the rest of the neighborhoods are single-family homes, for the most part, public streets. Where we have adequate right-of-way, public streets, we have public water systems in those areas. And so that's the real difference, is they're in areas where there isn't the ability to have the width or access for public water system, or in a situation where it's a fire system that was put on specifically for the business that's at hand. So just to touch on that. Now, I'm turning it over to BJ, and he's going to touch on a few of the issues that we, number one, identified originally, and then also the issues that we've identified through this public input process, and really, because that's, I think, was important to my education over the last 6 months. I've gone back and forth on where we should be on this issue, and so this information was very helpful for me, too, so.
Madam Mayor, members of the council, thanks for having us. Some of the issues we found with the private water system and hydrants is the privately maintained hydrants range from absolutely no maintenance to them to adequate, but we found that 50 to 60% of the privately owned hydrants were very minimally maintained, if at all. So we believe that we have hydrants out there that were installed and probably never have been turned on since. And we've gotten some responses from people and property owners that they didn't even know they owned a hydrant since properties have been turned over. And so we're making some assumptions that these hydrants have not been touched in quite a while. And we actually had an experience last month, where we responded to a fire. And this is in a development where they actually maintain their hydrants, and something must have happened to the hydrant, and at some point they replaced it. And they replaced it with a hydrant with a Minneapolis thread on it. And this goes back a long ways, but our adapters would not fit on there. We didn't end up needing the fire hydrant, but in the end, they thought they were doing the right thing by replacing the hydrant, but it wasn't to our spec. We use the national spec, but St. Paul and Minneapolis have their own threads, and this goes back a long history of
doing things the wrong way.
worrying about whose water they were using. But that's one of our experiences, and fortunately, we didn't need that hydrant for the fire. It was a very small fire that was extinguished without needing the fire hydrant, but in the event we would have needed it, that could have been, delayed our water delivery time. We also could have some water quality issues due to the lack of annual flushing. We know since these systems haven't been flushed out, there's sediment in there and so forth that could cause water quality issues, not only in that private water system, but also throughout the public water system. Hydrant maintenance, when we did the stores project, when we came to you last year, 15% of the private hydrants did not operate properly, needed some sort of repair, and we think we'll see that throughout the entire private hydrant system, if not more. And the last thing was from 2007 to 2011, you saw the statistic the last time we were here, 44% of our structure fires, we actually used a private hydrant to connect, to get the water to the fire. So a pretty significant amount, even though they're only a third of our system, it's about half the time that we use private hydrants. 13% of the private hydrants don't have an identified owner. This was one of the surprises to Steve and I as we went through this deal. And when you have that many private hydrants and we're trying to identify who owns them, it wasn't only that people didn't know that they owned them, but about 120 of them were on a property that may have gotten split or some other modification. We can't identify who put it in or who owns it. Which has been a challenge that Steve and the water department has worked on over the last couple months.
Over time, as properties redevelop or portions are platted off, the ownership of the hydrants may have been by the underlying property owner, and then when the properties were split, the hydrants fell into no man's land. And so that's one of the issues we're dealing with too on these private hydrants.
There's 13% of that out there.
Yes, that we spent significant time and still cannot find a responsible party that's in existence anymore for that hydrant.
Wow.
which means they have not been maintained in a significant amount of time.
Boy,
Abandoned fire hydrants.
yeah, a lot of maintenance
your money
issues
into that.
tonight. Property maintenance, fire hydrant maintenance.
Adopt a fire
But,
We'll show you some examples coming up here, but private hydrants obviously lots of times serve other properties. When we hook up to a fire hydrant or pull up to a fire, we don't necessarily determine between public and private, or if that private hydrant is on the property owner's property, or whether it's the adjacent property owner that owns that fire hydrant. We use whatever fire hydrant's the closest. We also do the same thing when we do plan reviews. When we do fire plan reviews for new developments, we take into account even the private hydrants in the neighboring property owner. We don't necessarily make them put in new fire hydrants if there's a private hydrant that could serve that new property in the distance that's required. The other thing is the non-coordinated maintenance can result in water quality issues. We have a somewhat fragile water system with a lot of pressure zones. And even as the fire department and the water department going out and doing some training and some flushing, we at times can cause some issues with the system and cause some damage. And we're afraid that by having non-coordinated maintenance or flushing, we could have not only water quality issues, but we could also cause water main breaks or other types of disruptions to the water system as we go forward. And here's that example of some private hydrants. That's the strip mall right off of Burnsville Parkway and Nicollet, where the subway is. If you can see the yellow dot there, that is a private hydrant right off Burnsville Parkway by the condos just to the east.
Yeah, Uptown Landing.
Yep, and there's a private hydrant. Steve, if you can go over.
Yeah, there's a public hydrant up in this location and then one again over on Nicollet here.
So again, based on where that fire is, we may take the private hydrant off of the condos next door to fight the fire on the strip mall. And there's a number of examples. The next one is the MGM Liquor off of Burnhaven. The two yellow dots are the private hydrants there, and there's a public hydrant across Burnhaven there. And so the two closest hydrants are actually private hydrants that aren't owned by MGM Liquors that we would use likely to fight that fire. So again, this issue became a lot more complex than we initially thought it would be, and there were a lot more factors once we started digging into it and got into the public meeting and meeting with the property owners.
Thank you, Chief Jungmann. So then just getting back to the magnitude of hydrants. When you look at the map, anybody who's been in my office sees this big map, and we have a lot of hydrants in town. And so when you're talking 3,700 hydrants in town, and roughly a third of those are private hydrants, it's a great quantity of hydrants, and just distinguishing between them is difficult. So if we kind of blow that up just to pull into an area, it's a little harder to see, but the lighter colors are the yellow are the private hydrants and the red are the public. And you can see, for example, in this area 13, they're completely intertwined with each other. So as fire chief mentioned, when they pull up to fight a fire, there's no tag or differential. They use whatever hydrant is best available for fighting that fire. And so our system wasn't, even though we allowed private hydrants, it wasn't set up thinking that, those private hydrants would only be used to fight fires at that building. It was set up that those hydrants would all be used in a common cause to fight fires citywide. So something that was important that came kind of true as we started looking through the issue. Touching back on the city authority. The city does have somewhat limited authority on this issue, mainly because the majority of the private hydrants are on private property. They're not within public easements or drainage or utility easements. And so our access to those hydrants is fairly restricted. However, the state fire code gives us specific abilities to make sure that those hydrants are inspected and operational. Whether the city does that or we hire that work out, we can require that as part of the fire code. We do that right now with sprinkler systems. Annually, their sprinkler systems are inspected internally by certified companies, and they submit paperwork to the city. So something similar to that, the city does have that authority. So based on that authority, the city looked at several options, and we touched on some of these back in December, and I'll just briefly go through these. The first option we talked about is, hey, could the city take over ownership of private water systems? Well, there's two big issues there. One, as I mentioned previously, we don't have easements. So legally, we do not necessarily have the right to take over the ownership or operation of those systems. And second, the cost, potentially. If a third of our hydrant system is private, you take on maybe not fully a third in water system, but a substantial amount of infrastructure to our water infrastructure that I don't think the city could bear without substantial rate increases. So that being the case, we felt option one was not a viable pursuit. Option two, which is one of the options that we considered, is that the city can conduct the fire protection inspections and testing of the private hydrants, and any required repairs and maintenance would be the private property owner's responsibility. Our pilot program for stores last year was this exact option. We inspected them, and then any repairs that were needed, they were notified by the fire department to the owners, and the owners made those repairs. So that's how we followed it last fall with our test project. The third would be, because we know that not the majority, but several of the private owners have systems that have fire sprinklers, and they have to do that annual inspection, is that they could hire their own contractor and do that. So that was obviously one of the things that we wanted to consider was basically, is there a public option to this, a private option, or some option in between those? And the fourth was do nothing. I think we actually have been doing the do nothing option, really. I mean, the city hasn't been monitoring the private hydrants, and so we don't believe that's viable. We also think that's a bad road to go down, and so that's obviously not something that we wanted to continue. So with that, that's kind of where we left off with the council last December. The direction was, let's get some input from our private hydrant owners, and let's sift through the information and come back with some recommendations. And so we did that. We took kind of a two-pronged approach. The first thing that we did is, because this isn't just a Burnsville issue, we wanted to get on the same page with our surrounding cities, specifically our larger cities that have the same issue that we have. And so Burnsville led an organized effort from CONDAC, which is our public works and engineering group countywide. And we involved 5 other cities with ourselves to develop something. We wanted to go along the same lines and develop something that would allow us, potentially as we talk about either using private entities to do this or sharing or being able to be cooperative in this. We felt that creating a level playing field and rules that were transferred from jurisdiction to jurisdiction made a lot of sense, both for ease of understanding by private owners, because in a lot of the cases, a private management company may manage several facilities in Burnsville, Lakeville, and different areas, and so we felt there was something to be gained there. We also, as I said, thought that this is going to leverage our different mechanisms to be able to get this done, whether we use private or we partner with another city. Then the other thing we did is we were able to identify 373 property owners who own one or more hydrants in many cases. Some own as many as 13, 14 hydrants. And we were able to send out information to them directly. I personally received input from about 70 of them. I spent about a 2-week period on the phone talking nothing but private hydrants with property owners, many who were surprised to know they had hydrants. In some cases, our GIS system was great because they didn't think they had a hydrant, and I could tell them, did you look behind the tree behind the back of the building? And sure enough, it was there. That also was alarming because it meant nobody had looked for the hydrant in that many years. So a little disconcerting, but it was good information and a lot of very healthy dialogue with our private enterprises. And then on April 30th, we conducted a public meeting, and we had about 30 to 35 private business owners or property managers, or in the cases of townhome subdivisions, representatives attend that. So we did get a fairly good response and input from the public. And so with that, combined with our CONDAC subgroup, we came up with some comments and some things that were taken as part of that process. Number one, they focused in on that the hydrants often service an area, not just their business. Oftentimes there's 3 businesses that are part of a plat. The hydrant's only on one of the businesses, but it actually serves 3 separate properties, and that's how it was originally laid out. That's something that many of them hit on. The hydrant, many of them felt that this is such an important thing. This is what the city provides fire protection. They felt not that their sprinkler system should be part of this, but the external fire protection system, the hydrants, because of the multiple properties, many felt it was important that there be consistency in the inspection, that the city be involved in that process. They preferred an option where the city oversees and conducts the inspections. And the reason for that is this is stepping out of the expertise of a lot of the property managers. They weren't comfortable necessarily knowing what they should do. And if it was broken, a lot of them didn't have a clue how they should proceed with fixing it. Something that, as I said, many of them thought the city actually owned anyway. The owners, we did have a small percentage, I would say, of the owners that have sprinklered buildings. About 50% of those owners are comfortable and have been operating inspections of their sprinkler systems. And in some cases, we're actually inspecting their hydrants and maintaining them. And so we did have a minority group that was very comfortable with just adding that to their annual inspection and felt like, you know what, if we're going to have to pay the city for it, we'd prefer to just continue on in this manner if that's something we could do. But then we did have the owners who don't have fire sprinkler systems who this was a totally new concept, having to do anything related to fire sprinkler or fire hydrant protection. And they were concerned about the additional costs and coordination. That was something that they were concerned with. And lastly, there was also a feel that the private inspection, and this came from the Condac group, we did have a concern about that consistency and that water quality. And anecdotally, what we can tell you is whenever we do fire flow testing at a business, we typically have an outbreak of water quality complaints in that area if it hasn't been flushed or maintained, and that's just the way it is. And we kind of chase those around throughout the summer. And so we did want to consider that. If there was a way to time these inspections and maintenance with our spring flushing during those couple-week period, that would really allow us to cut down on those potential maintenance issues. And so that's something that was a concern we wanted to look at. So based on that, Burnsville city staff, we're kind of the front runner of the cities. A lot of them are waiting. We kind of agreed on some parameters, but they wanted to see which direction we went. We did want to focus, though, first of all, on our council's ends and outcomes. It's important that this process be based in that. And if you look, this actually transcends more than what I listed here, but safety and city services. We talked earlier tonight about what do you expect the city to do? What are things that we expect the city to do? That was one thing that came through to me from the private owners was fire hydrants, fire protection, working fire hydrants. That's something we expect that the city's going to make sure happens. That's what your expertise is. That's where we think there's value in what you provide to us in our water rates and our utility bills. So that was something we did hear from those property owners. So with that in mind, the recommendation that we have is as follows. Obviously, we believe that fire protection is an essential city service, and I'm not just saying that because BJ's sitting next to me. We do believe that. I mean, one of the reasons we have a municipal water system is to protect homes and properties. That is one of the fundamental reasons. You can live out in the country. You can provide water in many ways. You can't provide fire protection in as many ways. So we do believe that's fundamental, and because it's essential. We agree, and with the public input that we got, we recommend that we proceed with option 2, which was, and it's a little bit of a hybrid of option 2, but that the city oversee this. And I'll touch on why. What we believe is the city or its agent. In this case, to be honest, initially, I think that this is something that we potentially would look at hiring a private contractor, which is what we did in last year's pilot project, or partnering with another city. There's a lot of benefits to that. And the first of which is just establishing what those costs are, too. It might be a more efficient system. It also offers the city some buffer from a liability standpoint to that private property and things going on there. And so I think that would be where we would probably start. Now, we certainly would look at costs after that and say, does it make sense to be done differently? I don't know the answer to that yet. But we were talking about it earlier tonight. This is a good example of where a private company can very easily do something for the city. And so that's something that we would look into.
And the cost would be borne by who?
Well, we'll get to that.
Yeah.
I'm going to get to that point. So, secondly, if a hydrant was requiring repair, again, similar to what we did last year, it would be tagged by the fire department and the repair would be ordered to the hydrant owner. So, similar to last year's program, any repairs or having to repair that hydrant would be totally the cost of the hydrant owner. Now, one of the things that we thought might be a compromise is could we help facilitate, not necessarily have the general public take on paying for the private hydrants repairs, but is there a way using city mechanisms to help give some options to that? And so we did come up with a couple of options, and one is that they just make the repair, which last year the apartment buildings that we worked with, they just made the repairs, we inspected it, and they were done. However, we do have the ability to have them petition us, and actually could potentially annually have the city do a small hydrant repair project where we assess that back to the property owners, and the city facilitates that. And because we do a lot of construction and water main work, we might be able to leverage that as an addition to a contract, or have one of those contractors who's in town is going to bid that and provide very good prices. We thought that would be an option.
No different than.
The third option we have, which is more if it doesn't get done, we do have the ability in this case, as we talked about at the last item, is that the city can have the work done and then assess that to the property owner. So we do have a mechanism to make sure this gets done. And so it does allow us to do an annual project in the fall, just a few hydrants. And again, this is one of those things that I think Councilmember Keeley touched on earlier, is as once the program's up and running, I'm hopeful that the incidents are gonna go down as we get those hydrants, we get through what hydrants are in what shape and they start being maintained. I think we'd see that the inspections will go quicker and there'll be less repairs, and so we're hopeful that again, so that's another reason to maybe look at contracting out a portion of this, is that long-term, this is hopefully gonna be a more efficient process, and so, something that we wouldn't necessarily need to, have full-time staff do. Now, getting to the cost part of this. Based on what we did last year, we estimate that this is a $60,000 to $75,000 a year program. I've come a little full circle on this because of a couple of important things. Number one, these hydrants don't just serve the property owners that they're on. I mean, that's very apparent. And when our fire department pulls up to these hydrants, they use whatever hydrant is available. They don't use a hydrant, oh, that one's owned by that business, can't use that one. We use whatever means are necessary. I believe that this is a fundamental core service, the fire hydrant portion of this. And so I believe that we should have at least the inspection part of it paid for out of our water utility fund. The repairs, as I mentioned, we believe that those should be assessed to the owners. And in my opinion, we have a $17 million utility water and sewer fund. I think that, and we'll talk about stores in a second, between stores and this, we're talking about, and in accelerated stores that we had talked about, we're talking $200,000 to $300,000 a year. I think that this is that important a priority that we just need to take a look at our $17 million budget and prioritize. And I believe we can move this into that budget, and we're going to have to think about some things. But I think this is life safety. This is what we do from a fire protection. So to me, getting into invoicing and trying to track down, and I think there's an added expense to that is, as I mentioned earlier, just knowing who owns the hydrants is difficult enough, and then trying to get into invoicing them and then tracking who's doing inspections and things like that. We think this is the most efficient way to make sure quickly that our fire hydrants are serving all of our customers. And I think we're committed, as we were with the stores project, to bring this back to you in the budget. We'll let you know what priorities we bumped around in that, but we think it should fit within that budget. I mean, as I said, a $17 million budget, finding $300,000 to dedicate to something of this priority, I think is something we just need to do. So that is what my recommendation is related to the funding on this. Now, just briefly touching on impacts to stores. It's fundamental because if the hydrant doesn't work, it doesn't matter if we put a stores nozzle on it, it isn't gonna help. So, to me, as I mentioned previously, because these hydrants serve more than just the private properties, I've come a little full circle on whether we should be involved in that. I think that we believe that we should, as we do our stores project, we should have a certain amount annually allocated to doing hydrants that are doing all the hydrants, the private and the public, and that should all be part of that expedited process. As BJ mentioned earlier, our highest vulnerability is in some of these high-density residential and the commercial areas, and those are the hydrants that get used the most. So there is a priority to get those done and from a life safety. And so, as I mentioned previously, budget-wise, I think that's something that I would take as a challenge to us to find room for that in the existing budget without an increase on that. Councilmember?
Yeah, Bill?
Can we force private hydrant owners to put on the store's nozzles?
I don't believe that we can force them to. I believe when they repair and replace a hydrant that we can make them bring it up to current standards. I don't know if the city attorney disagrees with me on that or not. We probably could try. Whether we'd be successful in pushing that, I don't know the answer to that at this point.
One of the things that you talked about is that if there is a cost to the repair, it would be 100%
Yep.
to those folks. So is
That's
this not?
different. Well, would the store's upgrade be, I don't think that's necessarily a repair, that's a problem.
No, it's an enhancement of the fire hydrant in our mind. We're increasing efficiency. What we're proposing is not that we're gonna do the expensive stores option. We're proposing that we would do adapters only to their hydrants. And then when their hydrants need to be replaced, at their cost, they would upgrade them to a full stores hydrant at that.
But so we, the public, would have to pay for their initial upgrade?
All the water users, I guess I don't want to view it as the public. Everybody who pays into the water utility, they pay, anybody who has a private system pays the same rate and pays for the public hydrants too. Our water system is a little different in that even the private users still pay for the public water system the same as the public because it's based on water consumption. That's how you pay your part of the share. So it isn't segregated at all. It's just that as someone who owns a private water system, you have kind of an increased cost of maintaining that additional system, which has additional purposes in many cases. It was put in specific for
Okay.
specific reasons.
Craig?
Madam Mayor and council members, when Steve presented this to me too, I sort of blanched a little bit, but I also tried to put myself in the position of someone who had faithfully installed a private hydrant. They installed it according to the city specifications that were in place, that was inspected and approved. And for our own very good reasons, I think that we're changing the specifications of our hydrants. But if I had put a hydrant and paid for a hydrant that met city specifications, to have the city come after the fact and say, we want you to change it, I'm not sure if I would think that was fair either. So to me, there was a bit of a fairness issue in their proposal too that felt better.
Okay. Bill?
Would the council consider something like that if it needed a repair, that then they'd have to pay for the inspection?
I'm with you.
Okay.
I don't want this to be a cost. It's a private hydrant, even though it does serve a public purpose. I'm okay with the property owners of those fire hydrants paying the inspections and the repairs. I understand where Mr. Albark is coming from. It's a benefit to the city, but it's still a private hydrant, and it's their responsibility. So I don't have a problem with the private hydrant owner paying for the inspection and the repairs,
Okay.
unless they want to convey it to us and we take it over as a city owner, which we can't.
Yeah, we
afford
don't
to.
want to take over.
No, it costs too much
No,
money.
no. No, I'm not there. Before, you have a question?
Well, what are we talking about in terms of cost? Let's say I have my own hydrant.
It's a 60 to 70
We're
program.
talking probably $50 to $75 per hydrant
For an inspection?
for the city. If that's what our cost, we believe our cost would be if we
Okay.
contract it out.
Here's what I
Okay.
want to relate, if I may, just fire extinguishers on private property, commercial, have to be maintained to stay code, and the property owner has to pay for the inspection and the refilling or recharging of that. To me, this is a little like the same thing. It's a privately owned fire hydrant or it's a privately owned fire extinguisher. It's the private owner's responsibility to maintain it, recharge it, repair it, et cetera.
Then the process would be, they'll have to submit and certify that it has been inspected.
Well, that would be a different, now, understand, if we went with a private process, there's a cost to that too. There's a $20,000 to $30,000 administrative cost to tracking, if, let's say we put this on the private owners and said, it's up to you to take care of that. There's a significant cost to that. There's also the policing that's gonna have to go on an inspection by us. We're gonna end up inspecting a certain number of hydrants whether we go this route or not. It's really what it comes down to is do we think we should charge a fee for it or not? And what we would do is we'd have a fee on the water bill for the private hydrants, which is with the cities that charge a fee. They put a fee to recover their costs on the water bill, and that's
Yeah.
completely
We
something
can
we
do
can
that.
do.
So the other is, I'm still wondering about this 13% of the
Well, the city will have
hydrants.
to
We'll have to
probably
just
take
take,
on those and
we have
take
to
care of
take,
those, yes.
maintain that 13%.
If we
that's-
want to, if we
Well,
want
if
to
we,
take care of them.
no- with nobody knowing it doesn't belong to anybody, so there's 13% of those hydrants that will fall under our jurisdiction just
Yes,
because.
we're talking 120 hydrants, 130 hydrants.
Yeah, that's about how much, yes.
So we're talking about fire safety, of course, and all this, but you kind of keep going to this water quality, kind of skipping over. Does that affect our drinking water when these things aren't
Well,
maintained?
it does, and that's why we still,
Yeah.
even if we were to charge a fee, we feel it should be done by the city. And the reason for that is then we could coordinate the inspection with our spring flushing and get it done, because there's a huge issue of chasing brown water incidents and things like that when flushing occurs outside of when we're doing flushing. And as I mentioned, we have instances where a restaurant will put something in on 42, they'll do some inspection, and we get brown water all the way down 42 to Savage that we're dealing with for a week or two, chasing it around. And that's just the nature of unmaintained water lines and what they do to the system. So,
There's some unintended consequences, if you will, when they're not properly inspected and flushed.
And
Yes, Mary.
didn't you mention too that there's a risk of breaking a water?
There is a risk also. We have high-pressure zones where if someone turns on a hydrant too quickly and causes a water hammer or shuts it off too quickly, they can actually break our water system. And we have to be very careful. When we have staff or fire staff in those areas, they have to have special instructions. And so that's another part of it too, is then you caused an issue. And that's why the city group recommended that whichever route you go, whether you charge a fee or not, the city should oversee the inspection, just to minimize damage to the public system and inconvenience and water quality issues.
Okay. Are we in the discussion point right now,
We got
Steve?
two,
Do you
we have two
one
left
more
that
thing?
we cut into, but one was the stores. How should we upgrade them? And we talked about, under this model, the city would still do it as part of our system. But I think before we get to that, we really need to discuss which direction do we want to go with the private hydrants themselves from a fee standpoint.
Okay. Yes, Mr. Bond, yeah, and, yeah, would you like to, so you want to,
Courtyard Circle.
yes,
Okay.
and you're a private,
Burnsville, 65 years.
yes.
Okay. How did this all get started?
Yeah, you want to
How
have
did
it?
this all get started? Why isn't the city why has it gone for 50 years on these private hydrants that some of them have never been maintained, some of them never been opened? How have we missed that?
Well, I think tonight
I
we're
don't know how
getting,
we missed it, but this all got started. I live in Courtyard Park, and we got 3 private hydrants, and I flush them. And I borrowed the diffuser from the city to flush them, and I didn't think I was getting enough water out of the hydrant. I called the Public Works Water Department. They came out, they put their meters on them, and they were very surprised also. And they put on a different set of meters, gauges, and we were only getting half the flow of water into our housing development. And it was because during the inspection part, when they developed our area, our main valve coming into our housing, or in the Courtyard Circle, was only half open. It was only half open. If we had a major fire, the volume of water wasn't there to extinguish or protect the fire, put out the fire. Not only did they miss the opening the valve only halfway into our housing development 13 years ago, the valve box that goes down to open up the valve was 8 inches, the cap to open it up, to get down to open the valve up, was 8 inches below the sod line. And I don't know how that could have missed the inspection department missed two parts there, critical parts.
okay.
And I think that's kind of how it all got started in the very beginning. And the water department was very receptive and took took very high interest into that. And I think this is how this all got started with the private hydrants. That they should, because other cities do this,
Yeah, you're saying other cities do the inspection
and the flushing.
and the flushing.
And the maintenance
rather
of it,
than
right.
Outsourcing that function.
Right, and well, most places don't even outsource it. The private
just-
hydrants are not maintained. The
Okay.
majority of the places, correct?
In other cities, right now, there's only.
In Burnsville.
In Burnsville, they're not, but
They're
just
not.
so you're aware, there's only one other city in Dakota County that's actually maintaining the private hydrants and actively, and that's Apple Valley. The other cities aren't doing anything like that, and Apple Valley was concerned because they felt they were overstepping what their authority was for what they were doing, and so that's why we got the group together to discuss the issue, so.
Yeah.
So with this new policy coming in, which is great, are you going to also sandblast them and paint them, private hydrants also? As
No,
far
We
as-
we haven't even
The
gotten
only-
that
the only
far.
thing the city is proposing to do
Mark.
is that the city would inspect them to make sure they're operational, that they're meeting the flow requirements necessary, and that they work.
So you're not going to
The
paint them or
maintenance,
anything?
no, the maintenance they'd still be owned by the private property owner.
So are you advocating for the city to do the inspection and then charge the maintenance back? Is that what you're here to tell us?
Oh, I'm saying that they should be operated annually.
And who do you think should be inspecting it?
Inspecting them? Well, if the city doesn't do it, then if they let me do it, they should instruct me on how to do it.
Okay,
You have to instruct me how to do it.
Okay.
And
Yeah,
nobody
and that's
has.
where Steve is saying it'll still come down to about a $30,000.
Well, and I think we think we can instruct and certify people, but it's just a different process. There's
Yeah.
a cost to it. It's a different
Yeah.
process of instructing and then certifying people, because we're going to want to make sure people
Are
like
doing it
Mark
right.
are qualified to be operating turn.
Yeah.
I have experience, that's why
Yeah.
I realized that I have background in this.
Yeah.
That's why I
Okay.
knew something was wrong.
Yeah, yeah. I remember when you talked to me about it and brought it
I
to
was,
staff.
very disappointed and concerned.
Yeah.
And I know there's other hydrants in the city of Burnsville that are in the same situation.
Okay.
That are inoperable and,
Because they're privately owned.
yeah. And my other question is on the stores. There's two ways of doing that storage nozzle. You can do a nozzle and a cap, and I got this price from a supplier. A storage nozzle and a cap, the brass nozzle, the storage brass part and the cap is $436. That's just to buy it.
Yeah,
To buy a storage adapter
yeah,
and a cap, the adapter just goes over the existing
Yeah.
threads in the
Yeah.
hydrant and the cap.
yeah.
It's $155
And that's what our
So-
staff is recommending is the adapter.
for the whole city.
Initially, yes,
and-
and
yeah.
then over time, as we replace the hydrants, they'd
So
be
for the whole
stored
city, we're gonna go with the 155.
Yep.
Yeah,
to start.
to start.
To get everything up to, because otherwise financially, we
Yeah.
can't afford to
No.
do it. So that's our start, and then as we
Yeah.
recon or we replace hydrants, then they would be, stores hydrants would be put
Yeah.
in without adapters on them.
So, my association, we will buy these storage adapters
Yeah,
as soon as I go back and ask for them.
okay.
Our board will buy them. So should we just go buy them, and then who puts them on? Do I put them on?
Well, and that's.
That's what we're talking
that's what we're
about
talking
tonight. We haven't gotten to that point yet, but at least we know that, you're willing to purchase them, the stores nozzles, and then and put them on. We still have to go through the discussion on who inspects. Okay.
But you're tracking with us, and I wish we had guys like you at all of our private.
Yeah.
Definitely in the minority,
Wow.
I would tell
Yeah.
you from our
Be great.
conversations.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so,
The city has to inspect them,
Yeah.
or hire somebody to do it.
Yeah.
That has
yeah,
knowledge.
and that's what we're going to start talking about right now.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you for coming in and
not
sharing. Oh, pardon me?
I'm not leaving yet.
No, I know, but I think we have to get the council to talk about what needs to be done and direct our staff. Bill?
Well, I agree with Dan that we assess back the
Yeah.
the inspection cost.
Yeah.
It's estimated 60 to 70,000, and if there's extra administrative costs, I'll get tacked on as well. I mean,
We don't need to pay for it.
Yeah.
As a city.
And-
Taxpayers.
Well, it's the same thing as we just did with Jenny with a fee for service.
and along those lines, that the city either do it or coordinate it.
Okay.
Whatever they believe is reasonable to
Yeah.
address the issue.
Yeah.
Because obviously, this gentleman coming before us before and tonight has made clear that this is a big problem, and we've heard it's a big problem, and it needs to be addressed.
Okay. So, Mary, you along the line
I-
of
yeah,
assessing back the cost?
I am,
Inspect and-
I understand the idea of, the city assuming that for uniformity's sake, because this is a service we provide. However, these developments and even private businesses have elected, for one reason or another, to have the privately owned equipment. So I guess I think that's not unreasonable.
Okay, Dan?
I agree.
Okay, and you already say. But, and one of the things in option three, is that there's mechanisms for them to pay all that, either $429 or.
Oh, those are for the repairs. That's, yeah, the
But can we tack
inspection
on the
fee.
inspection fee?
inspection fee would be part of your annual fee schedule that you'd
Yeah,
approve. You
yeah.
just have, for example, Bloomington has a $2.50 per month private hydrant fee that goes on the water bill of anyone
Yeah.
who's part of a ownership of a private hydrant. That would be
Okay, so
how
it
it
could
would
be on their water
Yeah,
bill.
so that would.
That's how it would be done, yeah.
Okay, Bill?
And I'd just like to thank the gentleman for already offering on behalf of his
Yeah.
association that they would step forward to
stores it.
finance
Yeah.
the cheaper, and I would hope that maybe some other will as well as time goes on, as long as that otherwise is an extra cost to us.
Yeah, yeah, and I thank Mark, too. We've been talking back and forth and about all of this, and you're all willing to pay your fair share of taking care of your hydrants.
Well, I was associated with the fire department for a
Yeah.
long time also,
Is that-
but it's all boils down to protection of life and property.
Yes, yeah,
And my association's willing to do that to help these guys out.
okay.
Thank you.
And Dan, did you have anything else to add? No? Okay.
Last
Steve?
piece would be how we want to address the stores issue. We're going to bring back to the council a stores program that's accelerated this fall. You certainly can make the decision at that time if you
Yeah.
want to, whether you want to have that be one program across the board or it's a little more difficult if we don't take the initiative and do it because
Yeah.
forcing the associations and when we look at where the best bang for the buck is on return on stores, it's in the private hydrants for the most
Yeah.
part.
Right.
And so getting them to comply might be difficult if we aren't at least participating with them, so.
Okay, bring it back, your thoughts on that and how we're going to do it. But you have direction with regard to the fire hydrants
Yes,
and
we
how
do.
they're going to
Yep.
be? Okay, great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Great work and a lot of heavy lifting and going out to the public and holding those public hearings. Thank you so much.
We learned a lot about our water
Well done.
system. It was very educational for staff also.
Yeah,
So-
so thank you, and I mean for the two of you. And Mark, thank you for coming in, and thank you for your input on all of this, too.
On your water main, however big it is, this big around, when you just use your home use like that, you only use just the center part of the water goes down that's all you use, just the center part of the wet pipe. And then when you open up the hydrants and start flowing a whole bunch of water, that's when you turbulate all the water and it expands out and gets the sediment in the brown water,
Yeah.
sediment on the bottom
Yeah,
of the pipe.
yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, and
That's what happens.
that causes a lot of problems
Right.
with all of the restaurants and everybody.
But
That's,
during your normal home use, you only use just a little pencil part right down the center of the water system.
yeah. Okay, good, thank you.
On behalf of all of us, thank you
Yeah.
very much.
Yes,
Thanks,
thank you. Okay. All right, thank you. Is there anything else? Okay, we move to roundtable. And now, this is, the first one is the sound wall. Mary, you wanted that to come back, and Steve is here too.
Well, I did because I think that we all got some comments and concerns from some neighbors in the area where the sound walls are going to go up along 35. And I don't think it's very clear to people, first of all, how the sound walls get there. And let's address that one first, Steve.
Yeah.
That's the question I have. How do sound walls get there?
Well, the way that sound walls, the Department of Transportation, and they came through, presented back in March, is
Density.
they do a noise analysis to neighborhoods and areas that adjoin state highways, interstates. And what they do is they look for neighborhoods that are exceeding a 7 decibel increase due to noise and that could be mitigated through placement of a wall. So they have a criteria where they say, if we put a wall here, could we cut the noise by 7 decibels to adjacent property owners? If the answer to that is yes, then they proceed and do a cost-benefit study to see if it's suitable. And they have a criteria where they actually determine whether it's feasible, and they cap what they call the benefit for the projects at $43,500. Now, I won't get into the specifics where they got that, but they established that as the maximum cost per benefited resident for the cost of a project. So if a wall cost $1 million, there need to be enough residents that are receiving a minimum benefit of certain decibels to cost justify it to be less than $43,000 per resident. That's how they do the criteria. And they've done it for the entire state of Minnesota, and they have a list of 200 to 300 locations where sound walls based on the cost-benefit analysis all the way up. And so that's how they determine what areas are eligible for sound walls. And so
Yeah, so I'm looking at your photo here, and are the numbered property, or the little circles with numbers in those are the beneficiaries?
those are the properties that would be so this was the first
direct-
stage that they did. They determined that there would be a 7 decibel potential impact to at least one property on each side of the roadway. And so that allowed them to go to step 2 of their wall process. And I'll pull up a graphic here that shows the actual properties that are receiving at least what's called this is where it gets even more complicated, what they call a 5 decibel. And these are the properties that get to be counted in their cost analysis, because these are the properties that are actually going to receive at least a 5 decibel reduction in sound, which is a noticeable reduction. 3 decibels is barely noticeable to a person, so 5 is what the Department of Transportation has determined. And so they've determined that roughly 13 properties on the east side and 12 properties plus the underlying owner of those properties, which is the manufactured housing property owner who rents those properties, are benefited. And so that's how they determine which properties are benefited by the wall. And that's how they then proceed to considering the wall through this voting process and then city consent after that.
So only those properties are the
Only those
voters.
properties receiving the
5%
benefit
reduction.
are allowed to vote on
That's
whether to
what-
have the
okay.
wall or not.
That's
Now,
what I think is not clear to a lot of
yes,
the
and that's what's clear
residents.
because we've gotten quite a bit of input from properties that
Right.
are not receiving the benefit. And
Right.
So, but I want everybody to be clear, the city has the final say because we are cost participating. If the city, even if the residents voted for the wall, it's still the city council's final decision on whether we proceed with the wall, because the city is investing about $120,000 in this case of state aid funding that we receive from the state towards the wall.
And the state aid funding is the gas tax
Yeah.
for our
Correct.
citizens
Yes.
to know what.
It's not general tax dollars,
not
but it's
general-
state aid dollars.
Right.
correct.
Right.
And so that determines the voting. Now, as we talk about this location, one thing is we've gotten very poor responses on votes in this area. Less than 20% of the properties in this area have actually even returned their ballot. And so one of the questions MnDOT had for us is, and as a staff, we certainly want to see a higher response if we even take it to the next level with the council considering. And so we were considering whether we should do, because we're going to bring this back to the city council in August as part of your CIP to determine whether you want to move forward with this project in 2015 or not. We were debating whether we should send out a second round of information and see if we get any additional ballots, or if we don't. Now, it's not unexpected when you have rental property situations.
and that's what-
Oftentimes, rental property owners don't necessarily take a vested interest in responding to city ballots or things of this nature. And so it doesn't surprise MnDOT or staff that we haven't, because the majority of the properties, certainly on the west side, are rental, in that they're renting the land. And then on the east side, there are several rentals as part of those townhomes on that side also.
Yeah. And I think when I was reviewing this, Steve, the property owner, the underlying owner, did he ever show up?
They haven't responded at all, so the
So,
owner of the
and so
property
you're
has-
right, all those rental folks and the property owner on those side, and that, on the east
We've
side,
received no votes from the west side at all.
yeah, because they're, it's a trailer park.
It's not uncommon they become disengaged just because they're not a
Yeah.
direct owner and they're on property taxes.
Yes.
Well, I have
I beg your
a couple
pardon.
other questions. One
Yes,
is regarding the removal of trees, because we all know trees they do mitigate sound. And I think we had a complaint about the sound walls over by McAndrews when
there's no
we took
trees.
a,
Yep.
but we took a lot of trees. No,
Yeah.
I know.
Yeah.
I'm just talking in general terms.
In this case, because these walls would be in the area between the frontage road and the highway, there is no trees in that area, so there wouldn't be any tree loss with these walls. Getting back to the McAndrews walls.
Yeah, I'm concerned
the-
about that.
Well, there's differing sides of that argument, and what I would tell you is the sound measurements in the neighborhood after the project are lower than before the project. So the trees, if they are increasing the noise, aren't increasing it for the properties immediately adjacent to the wall. they're increasing it potentially for properties outside of it. And unfortunately, we don't have sound measurements from before.
Yeah.
So what we
And that's-
believe, we're not sure whether it's an increase or a change in direct, I mean, there's several things that could be, it's a different sound, first of all. And so because they didn't take sound measurements outside of that immediate neighborhood, we have no comparison or bar for the outside
Yeah.
neighborhood. Yeah.
But this also is a concern of mine, and that is if you're only measuring these, taking sound measurements in those areas that are adjacent to the wall, that are gonna be affected by a 5 decibel change or 7 decibels, whatever that number is, I think, is it 5 or 7? You
It's,
mentioned
well,
both numbers.
they need it, well, it gets complicated, but properties have to have a 5 to be a
5.
voting member.
Okay, but but you're not
measuring
You're
outside
not
of
even gonna measure out. I mean, and so there could be a change in the neighborhood further away.
And what
if
I
you're-
would tell you on that
If you're
is-
removing trees.
There has never been a study done in Minnesota on that, but interestingly enough, your city engineer, Mr. Peterson, proposed to the state that they do a study with the sound walls being built at 13 and 5, and the state looks like they may fund a study based on Burnsville's idea to start documenting what are the further out impacts of sound walls.
Good.
And so that is something that's moving forward and actually would
Excellent.
be completed prior to these walls being done, if that was the
Okay.
case, so.
Bill?
But when you say prior to being done, we're stuck voting.
We still
with
have to
the-
make a decision
Right,
prior to
and
that.
if we decide
Yeah.
not to do it, we're out anyway, and
That's
you
right.
can't
And
undo.
that, okay, and that brings me to my last question, and that is, and I believe I emailed you on this, Steve, and that is, if you drive along 169, 212, and in those areas where Eden Prairie, there's some, and also 100, you'll see areas of Edina and Eden Prairie where, I mean, good Lord, the roads practically go right, across the stoop of these houses. There are no sound walls, and yet in other areas, there are sound walls that are fairly new. So my question is, did somebody say, we don't want sound walls?
We don't know.
And then another part wanted sound walls and they got them. I mean, the fact that if we turn them down one, if we say we don't want them in this particular location, but we might want them.
That won't restrict us, we did get a clarification. The only place, we would not get them in this location again, they would not be offered here again, but any other area of Burnsville that
Okay.
moved up the priority list would still be eligible for them at that
That's
time.
what
So-
wasn't clear
yeah,
to me,
so-
because my understanding was if we say no here,
No.
then we don't get them on
And
13
and
or
if
any
that
other
was the
place.
understanding, that's incorrect. It was in this location, they would
Okay.
not be offered again.
Okay.
But if they were, there, because there are other areas of
That's
Burnsville
fair
that are
enough.
on the list of 200 that could potentially
Yeah.
over time need walls.
Yeah.
And those areas would go through the same process as this one.
And
So
that-
it's not that Burnsville's thrown out if we decide.
Well,
this
and that
location.
was, somehow I got that
Well, I don't believe it was
understanding.
very clear in
Somehow.
the,
Did you have the same
that as well.
in the
understanding
March
too?
presentation, I don't think it was made clear that.
Well,
that
even
was the-
before
yeah,
March,
so-
I think that this issue was brought up again. Like, if we turn them down, then we'll never, ever get another sound
No,
wall.
and that is not the case, so.
Okay.
In this area,
Never get
This is-
sound wall
Yeah,
here.
these locations here
Now
will
you've
not
made
see a
that
sound
clear.
wall.
Yeah, thank you. You made that clear. You made that very clear. Because I think, I had a call from somebody in this Crystal Lake area who was under that same impression.
Yeah, and
So-
unfortunately for the Crystal Lake area, they don't meet any of those qualifications that we talked about at the beginning, and so.
I
yeah,
understand,
yeah,
but
so
they.
They're hopeful
but
that it
this-
wouldn't throw them out of any potential.
But this caller said, well, I know you have to have this one because then you'll never get another one in Burnsville.
And that's not the case, so.
Well, we need to make that clear to people because I think that's a general perception.
yeah.
And
And
we have
what
to
what
make
we
that clear.
also need to make clear is the sound study and the density, because they don't understand,
It's-
because and
trust
you
me,
and
it's
I know.
very complicated.
Yes, and you and I know because we get the ones from Carriage Hill
Yep.
all the time, and Carriage Hill believes that they should have a sound wall. So, my hope is that that's sometime in the future, as the road continues to increase and the traffic continues to increase, that there might be an opportunity for.
There's always a
for care.
possibility. They're
That's
way
right.
down the
And that-
list, so
you
that
never know.
possibility is
Yeah.
very slim, but,
I know, and I tell them, well, I'll
would have to be a
mention
massive amount of
Carriage Hill
funding for
area
walls to
again,
occur.
yes.
Really,
Yeah,
one
Bill.
last quick question. Of the 20% then that responded, what'd they say?
yes, they're in favor. We got no responses against. All the responses that were votes were for, so.
Okay. Thank you
Of the
very much.
affected areas.
Yep.
I think this helps clear up some misperceptions,
just
so
Lake
thank you
Automotive.
very much.
Yep. And we will bring, as I mentioned, we'll bring this back to the council in August as
Yeah.
part of your kind of pre-CIP meeting. And at that time, as part of the CIP, we'll make a decision whether the council wants to fund, but we'll have the voting results at that point.
Okay.
And based on those results, MinDOT may not recommend moving
Yeah.
forward with it if they don't get any interest in the voting.
Okay.
That'd make it.
Anything else, council members, for Steve? Anything else? Okay, thank you very much. The next item, now, yeah, it's after 10, you can go home to your families. Yes. Craig, okay, the nuisance ordinance provision on
Madam Mayor and
beekeeping.
council members, we've been approached by a resident who cites some environmental data regarding the drop in the level of bees, and that it play of course, an integral part in pollination and plant life in general. And because of that, he's interested in becoming a beekeeper here in the city. The city attorney advises that beekeeping would fall under our animal nuisance ordinance. The resident, Mr. Hardegger from Melody Lane, says perhaps the council should consider changing that. And what I've said to him is, we don't have an initiative and referendum process in the city. All I can really do is to see if there's any interest in the council in terms of studying this. And I promised them that I would do that, and that's what I'm doing right now.
And council, if we know what our staff is charged with and the amount of work is there, do you want them to get into this issue, or do you want to just pass on this issue? Okay, Councilmember Kaufman?
I'd pass.
Okay. Mary?
Well, I know what Mr. Hardegger's saying. I mean, this is actually a global problem.
It is.
But surprisingly, I did a double take. There are honeybees in my yard this year. I have not seen them in years, In fact, I've been looking for Japanese beetles, so I was looking closely, saw some honeybees. Where they come from, I have no idea. I'm a little concerned because I guess I could see it on larger properties, like in our R1A. But I think in an average city lot, I'm a little.
Do you want our staff to be putting time into this, Mary?
Probably not.
Okay, let's,
Yeah.
okay. Dan, do you want our staff to be putting time into this?
I think if it were earlier in the year, yeah. I think beekeeping's a kind of a safe hobby for people to have, if you're done properly, but at this time of year, maybe not. I don't think we have the time on it right now with all the other budget concerns we're taking care of.
Okay. Dan?
Well, I didn't know much about honeybees, so I asked my honeybee, and she knows a lot about honeybees, and she's well aware of this global issue and the shortage of
global
bees,
issue.
and said, nature stops if the bees don't pollinate. I mean,
Yeah.
plants can't grow, et cetera. They're an integral part of the cycle, which is very concerning. I'm not necessarily saying that we need to spend time on it, but I do agree with Councilmember Sherry when I think of Southwest Burnsville, and I don't know where Mr. Melody Lane is. I didn't
It's
Google
right
that.
over here, right off of the Parkway.
It's close
Yeah.
to a densely populated area with
Yes.
small lots,
Mhm.
or
Yeah,
smaller
it is.
lots than
Yeah.
Southwest Burnsville.
Yeah.
So, but I did ask Carrie what, bees scare people, because they fear they're going to get stung, and she said that honeybees
They're very
are,
docile.
they just go pollinate and back to the nest and pollinate, and they're not, they come back to where they're making honey, and they are not like a bumblebee or a wasp or any other. So they're not that big of a concern. So that quelled my concerns for neighbors of a beekeeper being a little bit nervous of kids playing in their backyard when there was bees, coming in and out of the area or back to their honey-making nest. So, but I don't sense there's a lot of support to spend time on it right now, but we acknowledge that it is a problem and that we may need to be open-minded in the future to people wanting to keep honeybees.
Yeah. And I agree, it is a global problem and we need the bees. But at this point, if we enter into this, it's a lot of work for our staff to, remember when we did the chickens? It's about bringing the community together and having everybody, and then also, educating people to get to your point, because people are fearful. But if you don't educate
And some
them.
people are fearful with good reason. I mean, some people are.
Are allergic.
Very highly.
Highly allergic.
And honeybees will sting you.
They will, but they're
And so
not
the thing is,
terribly
I think
aggressive.
I think at this point, we all acknowledge that it is a global issue, and it is very important for us as a society to address it. But here in Burnsville, we are just not equipped at this time and staffed at this time to even address the issue.
Madam Mayor and council members, all-day work session item for reconsider it at the all-day work session for
Of 2013.
possible.
Yeah, I'm for that.
I'm okay with it.
For possible inclusion in
Well,
next year's work plan?
Or to even take a look and see, if we do, just to have a discussion on an all-day work session, to see if there's, if we're going to do it, what zone? Or do
Yeah,
we
well,
limit?
May I?
Yeah.
Dan,
Yeah.
you want to read this?
No, you can't.
To the beekeeper, there's always a risk of being stung while working around honeybees, et cetera, et cetera. To other people, as well as the risks to the beekeeper in the apiary, there are risks to other people and property in the vicinity of the apiary. Flight paths are often quite direct and may take bees straight into areas where people are going about their normal business. Stinging occurs when individuals try to wave away bees in a manner that looks threatening. So it's
There's a lot of education to be done. There's
Yeah.
a lot of convening for people. It's a lot of work. It's not just change the ordinance and that's it. No, there's to be responsible to our residents. It's a lot of work.
if this person lived out in the, country in a
Southwest.
larger lot, or even Southwest Burnsville, they
Okay.
might be, it would be certainly a lot easier.
I'm going to move us along. Any reports? Bill? You have any
Yes,
reports?
I dropped off a copy to everyone, and just a heads up that down the road, the Black Dog Watershed Group is talking about needing considerable funding to do some alum work, and there's no funding yet designated for that. That would cost us, I think, 2/3 of that, because so just when I heard that at the meeting, I asked our representative to type me up a summary, and I'm just simply bringing that to your attention.
Okay. Mary?
Nothing else.
No report.
Okay. Ben?
No, all the committees I'm on didn't meet this last month.
Okay. Dan?
Nothing urgent, and in the interest of time, I prefer that we adjourn the meeting.
Okay. And just remember, everybody, International Festival
Saturday.
on Saturday. So, and that's good. Yeah.
In regards to the International Festival, the International Festival Committee has asked that in your absence, if somebody from the city council would like to do the welcome.
Well, there's it would be Dan. Because,
This weekend, I'll be in Blaine at a soccer game.
okay, anyone else then, other than, because Dan is the
I'm
acting
planning to
mayor?
attend. I mean,
Why don't we?
I'll be there too.
Well,
well, let Dan do it. It'll be a size school.
okay. Just welcome everyone.
Yeah.
Oh, can I say goodbye?
Since Dan and I are not going to be, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, good. All right, because usually when I'm not here, it's the acting mayor, whoever that acting mayor is, but Dan's not going to be here, so then this Dan's going to do it. All righty.
I'll get over my stage fright.
So just remember, International Festival, and we're adjourned. Thank you. Yes, oh my.